Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen of February 25th, 2020. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first matter is announcements and public comments. Does anybody wish to be heard? Yes.
Hello, everybody. I know you know me. I've been here before. I was just wondering...
Just for the people that are viewing, why don't you introduce yourself?
It's Holly Shaker. I was wondering if you guys are going to move forward at all with maybe putting together a blight committee. We were kind of talking about this over the last couple of years, and I was just wondering, is it something that still can be maybe put together? I would like to be on the committee and put something together and volunteer my time. And I'm just wondering if this is something that you see in the near future, or am I just basically wasting my time?
Well, why don't you tell the people what the committee would be trying to accomplish?
Well, what we'd like to accomplish is to address some of the residential homes, not just commercial homes, commercial property, I should say, that people have issues with, their property, with collecting junk, maybe hoarding, maybe that is affecting other properties that surround the area. Even my own street, I have a few homes that need to be addressed, and I really don't know where to go with it except having the town support and putting some kind of committee that some people can find out what the issue is. Is it somebody elderly? Do they need help? Is it, what the problem is? And I think other towns off Cape have put in blight committees and blight issues, eyesore situations, because I think it affects the property of other homeowners like myself. I think it drives down the property of the homes. If I have some friends that are elderly that would probably like to sell the home in the near future, but because of surrounding property that is a blight home, I think they won't get the value of their home, and I'm sure they're thinking of that, and I just don't know how you get the ball rolling, and the only way I can see it is if I get the support from you guys and the town and try to put something, and I don't know everything about it, but I'd like to at least try to do something, because I know I've been living here since 2010, and driving around, I've seen one house, and then it's two houses, and it's two houses on this street, and it seems like it's progressed over the years. And I just think we should try to do something to keep the town of Yarmouth beautiful and nice, and a place where people want to come and live. If I wanted to sell my home, I'd have to think about, the two houses on my street. How is that going to affect me selling my home? And I think that's an issue with a lot of people, and I'm sure there's a lot of complaints on different areas, not just in Yarmouth, but a lot of the Cape. Some people have different circumstances. Some people, they don't have the funds, they don't have the means to clean up their property, but it does affect other homeowners, like myself and other homeowners. So I just wanted to just refresh your memory and see if there's something that we can maybe work on in the near future for some kind of committee or something that can reach out to, homeowners and see, without being aggressive, but just doing it in a nice way, and see if there's something that the town can do, or maybe a volunteer group, something to clean up the town, basically.
So as I recall, you were talking about the formation of a bylaw prohibiting certain kinds of nuisances on property,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, something like that. But it's not just me. I need, there's got to be 4 or 5 people or more that can participate in maybe putting something together, and then have you guys review it, or the town review it, and see if it's something that works, that would be, comfortable for everybody. I don't like to pinpoint and poke out, just one house here and one house there. I think it should be a standard thing throughout the town. I don't want to attack anybody personally. It's just, I just feel, I see it, and I see it happening more and more. And I just feel there's something that we may be able to do. And I'm just hoping that we'll get some kind of feedback or something. And just like I said, to refresh your memories and just see if there's something that's possible. And you might say there's not. You might say it's too complicated or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to address it myself.
If that approach was by way of a bylaw, then that bylaw would
Cover the whole
go through a
town.
committee and would be reviewed by the board, and probably input from other boards like the Board of Health,
Yes.
and then ultimately would have to go to town meetings. So it would,
Well, if we can simplify it, I know there's other towns. I've gotten letters and seen stuff in newspapers off Cape that other towns have put these bylaws in place and been successful. There's probably not too many on the Cape. I don't know why, but there probably should be. The Cape is a really nice place, but I've seen it, changing over the years in the short time that I've been here.
okay.
So it's just something for you all to think about.
All right.
And I appreciate your time again.
you.
Right,
Thank
thank you.
Anyone else? Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Tom Nicanello, Precinct 3. Wearing my parade gear tonight. As you know, it's the last meeting before the parade, so I'll introduce myself as Tommy O'Nick, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows the parade will be on the 7th, and we understand it's going to be a long-range forecast. It's going to be sunny and about 40, so we expect a lot of people, and we also want to thank each and every one of you for your support. We do a lot of work, about 10 months out of the year, trying to bring people to Yarmouth for the parade, and in March, the beginning of March, you know how it's important to bring as many people as possible here, so we are trying to do the best we can with your help. Thank you.
Vita?
Vita Morris. I have in my hand here a list of the possible trims in the school building project. And at the very top is the one where somebody from this town apparently proffered to forego $170,000 worth of building permits. And this was done, at least the way this is headed is accepted at school district on the 2nd of October 2018. If this board, nobody on this board was even aware that something like that was going on.
I was. So was the town administrator. We brought it up at the last meeting.
No, I mean at the time that it happened.
So for clarification purposes, that was put on there way back then as an area or item for future consideration, and it was explained to the building committee at that time that the only entity that can waive the fee would be the Board of Selectmen. And it's been very clear on that. So to this point forward, there's been no request by the school administration or the school building committee to waive that. That it was just simply added by the architects on the list of items that could be put up there for a future deduction. But again, very clearly stated, only the board can waive that provision.
Well, I would hope so, because otherwise it's unconscionable. The wording of it, to say it was accepted at school district and gives the date, so it sounds like somebody proffered it and they already accepted, and it's
Vita, so at that meeting, the school building committee put under consideration a menu of items for future that could be deducted from the project. So that was an opinion based on conversation there that is an item that, yes, if the board took a vote to reduce or waive the fees, that would be added. So that document had to get generated at that moment in time because we were requested by the school building authority to generate a document that indicated what from the project could be trimmed if it was needed to be done. That was getting it in position for project estimates. So the theory was if the estimates came in above what the engineering estimates above what the project was budgeted for by the MSBA, you needed to go to the list to start doing deductions like we've been doing recently to bring the project in at that time under $117 million. That's
right.
all that is.
All right, but
It's not a commitment. It's just simply, it was voted by the board as a future item that could be for consideration.
well, we went through that list, and they have the different categories, accepted or rejected or not recommended, whatever. If that's the case, well, this is at the very top of that list.
Yeah, and we went
Why,
through it
why
the other
didn't
night.
why didn't anybody from Yarmouth speak up
No,
and
we did.
say that?
We did. We went through this the other night when we reconvened the building meeting. Selectman Talley and myself were there, and we brought it up as part of, hey, you can't add that to the deduct list unless the board takes a vote to do that. And so the architects got that message, and they are working to revise the project scope to
I
fit
must have
the
been-
reduction.
At that point, I must have been looking for this list because I didn't have it in time. By the time I got it, we were almost
That was
halfway down the
addressed
page.
on that meeting in January when we reconvened the building committee.
All right.
Yep.
But I'm just curious, with this public hearing on the budget, how is this going to be presented? I mean, are we going to see the budget items or the budgets for the various departments?
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman? So in the charter, it requires the Finance Committee to present by February 28th their recommendation for a budget. And the charter further goes on to say that the town administrator, at a time prior to annual town meeting, will present to the board, along with capital budget, Finance Committee, and the school district, the budget at a public hearing. So in the past, we've had this public hearing at this late date in February. However, the budget, since we delivered it to the selectmen in December, and we have taken feedback from the board as we've gone along through the months, and the Finance Committee and capital budget, the document that's generated for a review tonight is not necessarily going to be reflective of the final document put forward at town meeting. So I spoke to the chairman tonight. DY will not be in front of the board until the Tuesday, I think it's the 24th, after we were going to meet on the 17th, but we changed that date to the 16th. That's a school committee meeting night. So DY will their opportunity to present the budget to the board will occur the following week. On that day is when we will actually post the public hearing, and we plan to have a budget document that would be reflective of what would be sent to town meeting. The document tonight is it's where we are at this moment in time with the budget. There's been a lot of movement, even up until today, on numbers within the budget. So it's more like a planning meeting, if you will, to let the board know where we're presently at on a number of items that they've weighed in on since December.
Well, I remember asking last year if we could have an opportunity for the public to participate in some way when the budget is being built for each department, rather than seeing it only on the warrant, and then people complain that, some of us are asking all sorts of questions at the town meeting and taking up the time.
So the Mass General Law this is the hearing that we're talking about. So that's the moment in time.
Today?
No, not today. It will not be today because we did not advertise it. On the 24th, I believe that's the Tuesday, the last Tuesday in March, or the Tuesday we'll meet. That will, we will post that, and that is the process or the opportunity provided by statute to allow the public to weigh in on a proposed budget. Yeah, it's March 24th. So you'll have that opportunity at that time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jack McCormick, Precinct 3. It's been a while since I've been up here, but I occasionally come up here, and I do this mostly for the people at home. I want to express my opinion of the tenor of the town and how it's being conducted. I think we have a wonderful and studious Board of Selectmen. They do a great job, a very commendable job. The town has a marvelous staff. I think the town administrator is stellar, and the assistant town administrator, I have worked with him seriously, and he does a great job, too. We're lucky to have all of our department heads. They all do a wonderful job. I have been a volunteer in the town for over 25 years now, and I got to tell you, everywhere I go in this town, as I meet the people who work here, they really do a wonderful job. And I'd like to thank them as a citizen of Yarmouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Jeff?
Yes, good evening. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. Just a general announcement. We did issue a press release a little bit earlier, but there is a road closure, overnight closure anticipated for the Parkers River Bridge. All the businesses will be accessible along Route 28, but the designated detour route will be Winslow Grade of Forest. There is some excavation work that needs to happen at the bridge location, so only the bridge itself will be closed, but to through traffic, they'll need to take that designated detour route. It's expected that it'll start at 7 o'clock on Thursday night. It'll probably go into the morning hours. Hopefully we can get that corrected as quickly as possible. There was some previous settlement several weeks ago. It's no active settlement currently, but Mass DOT is requiring us to excavate at the bridge location to verify and address any settlement, to make sure that everything is functioning properly, which we fully expect it to. But that's a Mass DOT requirement for us to excavate, compact, and repave that section. And so we'll have to do that in the road, which it's a very, as you all know, is a very narrow roadway currently. And so because of that, we'll need to do an overnight closure at that location.
Thank you.
I just have one question, and I know the fire chief is here. Route 28 being a main thoroughfare for ambulances, how do we convey that to the Lower Cape towns?
The fire chief has already done that. He could probably comment more on that, but he's taken care of that.
Okay, that's okay. I just want to make sure that that's in the mix.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? I just have one announcement. Last weekend, I got an email from our town moderator letting me know that he did not intend to run for re-election after this town meeting, and asked if I would read a letter he had drafted or what portions of it I thought were appropriate, and that he was also sending it into the Dennis Yarmouth Register. Well, it did appear already in the Register. I don't know how many people saw it or how many people didn't. So he writes that he wants to thank, it's addressed to neighbors, voters, and town meeting members. And he wants to thank everyone for the extraordinary privilege of serving as town moderator for the past 12 years. My respect and appreciation for the town meeting process grows with each passing election cycle, recognizing that it is perhaps the last true bastion of democratic participation and governance for elected representatives and our town professionals who provide the basic services of all the various things that the town provides. During my time with you, he's tried to ensure that everybody had an equal voice, and that even those who held minority positions, their rights to speak were rigorously protected. One of my personal long-held beliefs, he writes, is that elected representatives should serve for fixed terms to enable others the opportunity of serving in these capacities and providing new eyes and ears to help guide our civic affairs. And although my desire to serve our community in this and other roles is still very much a guiding principle in my life, I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't realize that it was time for me to step away from the moderator's role so that others might experience the privilege and honor that I've enjoyed in that position. Just finally, let me say this. One of the hardest things I've done in my life, and one of the most rewarding, was taking the risk to run for elected office here in our town. Through that process, I've met some of the most decent and hardworking people that our community has to offer. I've seen just how difficult it is to make decisions which affect other people's lives, directly and have a much greater and deeper appreciation for the professionals who serve our town, and most especially the many volunteers who make this community such a wonderful place to call home. And then at the end, he gives a call to service for others out there to come forward and get their papers. And he says in the last sentence, we need good people with strong character and moral integrity to steer us into the many challenges which lie ahead. With deep appreciation, Dan Horgan. So, given that this has already appeared in the paper, plus hopefully the attention it will get for people who watch the meetings, everybody should be well apprised that there is a vacancy in that office, and you can get nominating papers from the clerk's office. I don't know the last day. I think it's sometime in late March, though. There's still plenty of time to get papers if you're interested in the position of town moderator. All right, so we're going to move to the public hearing. Now, for the board's sake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the hearing by reading the notice, and then I'm going to give you a brief explanation as to why we cannot go forward with this hearing tonight, and then ask for a motion to postpone the hearing. The Yarmouth Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority, has received an application for a new annual wine and malt restaurant license from the New England Authentic Eats, LLC, doing business as Papa Gino's, Victoria LaFrance manager. The premise, located at 940 Route 28, South Yarmouth, is a freestanding building. It is a single-floor unit with a dining room having a seating capacity of 96, a kitchen area, an office area, walk-in refrigerator, freezers, and restrooms. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, February 25th, 2020, at Yarmouth Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Board of Selectmen meetings begin at 6 o'clock. Written comments will be accepted until 4:30 p.m. Friday, February 21st, 2020, in the Selectmen's office at Town Hall. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. So, what happened was, on Friday, Linda Hill and I got a copy, we got sent an email from Phil Magnuson, the police liaison to licensing. And it appeared that through an error on the part of the applicant, that the person he interviewed, which is customary when we're giving a new license, to have the designated manager meet with Phil in advance to go over the local rules and regulations. It turns out that that person is not of legal age, although very, very close. But close is not good enough. So we're sparing to the people, the time and energy to have to come down here and appear before the board. What will happen is they'll be back shortly. The hearing will have to be re-advertised. So I just need a motion to postpone the hearing.
Are we postponing it, or will?
No, we're going to postpone it. That's all we need to do.
Make a motion to postpone.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Before we proceed with the meeting, can we please have a moment of silence for Bernie Malone, who passed away recently and was a longtime employee of our highway department. Thank you very much. Roadway banner application. Who's got that?
Kyle will handle that. Mayor Gilmore.
there, Jack.
Hello, my name is Kyle Pedicini. I'm the Economic Development Coordinator. I'm here with members of the CEDC, Joanne Crowley, Jack McCormick, and Mary Vilbon to present our roadway banner application. So last time we were here before you on this topic was in July when we presented the policy and application to you, which was approved. The policy was in your packet. So under the policy, the Board of Selectmen need to approve the application. So the application's also in your packet. Just to review it briefly, we're looking to install 4 of the banners in the Four Corners area and 6 near the intersection of Route 28 and Higgins-Kroll Road. We have received permission from the police department, the DPW, and the building department, which I don't think was in your packet, but I have a copy of their signed permission if you guys would like. The design of the banners is also in your packet. So the idea is to have springtime and summertime design as well as a late fall and winter design. So the sailboat and the windmill would go in the Packet Landing Four Corners area, and the beach and seagulls would go in the Route 28 Higgins-Kroll area in the spring and summertime. And they'd be changed over to the snowflake wintertime design, probably in late fall. We received permission from Eversource to hang them on the poles. And there's also a map in your packet depicting where exactly which poles they'd be hung on. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Kyle. Signs are quite nice looking. I'm happy to see that we're going to be seeing those up. One question I had, and this is, I don't remember, what was the original, were these signs originally intended to be for the sole use of the town, or were they intended for some other purpose?
Yeah, they're basically solely intended for town entities. So this is a CEDC sponsored application. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right. My question was that if they were...
If I may, the planning board, when we put forward this in the annual town meeting in 2017, your memory is good, it was some consideration as to it being anyone could buy a sign. And Jay Tallerman came in and advised that that would not be in the best interests of the town because of free speech requirements. And so we then moved back and adjusted that so that it reflected the town would own the banners and would determine their content. And so it did go back and forth with Jay Tallerman several times. It wound up, so that's why CEDC is the applicant.
Okay. It occurred to me that if these were going to be, available for purchase, that you're kind of taking up all the prime locations, but since they are not going to be, have at it.
I don't have any questions. I think that they look great, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. I always like going to some of these small towns, especially in the walkable areas, and seeing the character that it adds to the community. So I'm excited. I hope that they stay maintained well, though, over the course of time.
Absolutely.
Norm?
No questions.
Mark?
In terms of the design, how did you arrive at this design? What was the process that you used?
Excuse me. So this was a company, Downtown Destinations, that I've worked with for probably 10 years. So I contacted them, we give them the GPS coordinates, and then they see the features in your community and they design it, and then we go back and forth. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much how they came up with the design for each of those locations.
When you say, Mary, when you go back and forth, that's the CEDC committee?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I'm
sorry. So the
sorry.
whole committee was involved in helping shape the look of this? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Good job.
I don't have any questions.
I'll make a motion that we support or endorse the draft that was presented to us for the roadway banner sign policy dated 7/17/19.
I'll second that.
Is that,
If I may, you guys actually already approved
Yeah,
that
we're not
in
doing
July.
so it's not a draft anymore?
Yeah, it shouldn't have been titled a draft,
So
sorry.
you need
We were looking for approval of the actual application.
Of the roadway banner application as presented tonight, dated 1/9/2020 from the Community and Economic Development Committee.
Second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the application, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? So that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We could have design stickers.
I was just gonna
Okay,
say.
fiscal year 21 budget public hearing,
Yeah.
but this is not going to be a public hearing, is it?
No, it's going to be more of an update on the budget process.
Are we going to be able to meet the charter
Yeah,
requirements
so
by not having?
the charter requirement only calls for the Finance Committee to present to the board by February 28th.
Not in a public hearing?
No.
Okay.
So a public hearing is to occur at a time in which the Finance Committee, the Capital Budget, and School Department present at a time before town meeting, a final document. So we're not quite there, but that'll plan for March 24th.
Okay, so this is kind of a work in progress at this state. There's no final budget, so people out there that are watching this should realize that there can be some changes, and probably will be.
Ready?
Ready?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Board of Selectmen, I'll try not to refer to the Board of Selectmen as you guys, so stop me if I do. My name is Ken Mudi. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee. A few things I'd like to update since the last time we met. At the town meeting in the fall, we changed the number of Finance Committee members, and we added two new members. We now have a total of 8. I'd like to introduce one new member, Sarah Coles, who's a new member. Another person, George Perkins, is a new member. He's not available tonight, nor is Jack Moylan. To my right, I have Jessica Norwood, Brian Gardner, Robert Shavara, who is the vice chairman of the committee, and Nathan Ladley. So thank you. I'd like to go through some of the first parts of, well, actually the whole thing fairly quickly. Just like I said, an update, we actually have, even though we have not completed all the votes on the budgets, we have voted on most of the budgets. The committee, since the middle of December through the middle of February, met a total of 10 times. As you know, we do meet throughout the year, but December through February is a very, very busy time, so 10 separate meetings. Very pleased with the process that Dan, in particular, along with the department heads, have put together to make the presentation process so much more cohesive and big picture orientated, which makes it easier to understand whatever financial issues may be embedded in the presentations. I also want to give a special thank you to, and I know you've seen it, the overall budget analysis that Rich put together that I think was as fine of a description of the components of the budget as well as the changes in the budget and some of the in between the lines items in the presentation. It made this year's process so much easier. So thanks to all. Let me see if I can get this to work. Which button?
Turn it.
I have to aim it at that?
Called in the service.
The tall one.
Just hit
You
it
didn't
that
want
way.
any ladders on live TV, so.
No.
Yeah, but I can't.
You make it look so easy.
Even if I could move it.
Perfect.
I can't help you with that.
You're high. Yeah.
Ken, is it on the side? Ken,
Oh, yeah.
She's
the
good.
side button.
Technical difficulties. I actually only have 4 slides, so it's too bad.
We have them here, so.
Yeah. While we're working on it then, Oh, there we go, because we certainly want the public to be able to see this. Let's just quickly go over the numbers, and again, these are not finalized, but they're pretty close. The overall municipal fund budget, $40,455,245, which is an increase of 5.1%. And for people not familiar with the budget, these are expense budgets. There are always offsets in the budgets, but this is the actual expense portion of the budget. The enterprise funds separately, but included, are $10,608,834. Those are, primarily golf, water, and I know we'll talk golf very briefly in the next couple minutes. I think you've seen plenty of information on golf. Capital budget, and the Capital Budget Committee will be presenting right after us. They have a budget of $6,112,661. Out of the routine levy, again, I'm going to address that a little bit later, is $1.5 million. Roadways, again, close to $1.5 million. Enterprise capital, $2,120,000. Reserves, including stabilization, $838,000. And free cash available, $120,000. Free cash, you will also have a full presentation. We have not yet seen the finalized version of all the free cash. We've seen all the potential components, and there will be a separate discussion on free cash a little bit later. So we have my clicker here. Boy, that's good. I wanted to highlight a few things that come out of the process that are not the kind of things you see every day, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody in the town understands some of the things that are not the highlighted items that everybody hears about all the time. And for example, a couple years ago, there was some concerns about ongoing maintenance issues at some of the tennis and basketball courts and some other things in the parks. And it's obviously very difficult to fund a project to patch up courts, et cetera. However, under Jeff Colby's leadership, per our recommendations, there's been ongoing work to patch up some of the courts. It's a work in progress, but again, I think it's important that people know some of the things that the town is doing to try to continue, certainly not to let things fester. In addition, two items about with some of the interns that the town utilizes, employs. Some of the work that's done by interns, again, we considered it in the budget process. These are the things we pull out and here, and again, want to highlight among many other things. There's a trailblazing. Someday, all of our trails in town, hiking trails, will be mapped out with GPS coordinates, and it's a work in progress that an intern, along with some volunteers and some other helpers, went through some pretty messy, muddy trails to try to get this project going in the right direction, and it's something I think the town should be proud of. In addition, under Health Services building inspections, we had a very enterprising intern who identified through diligent research a number of properties that hit the inspection list, which generate additional revenues for the town. Hidden gems, the kind of things that we all say if you're in a business or whatever, gee, I wish we had somebody that could do that, or I know there's something there that we can find. And there's a lot of things in this town that a lot of people are finding. The final thing that has been ongoing, but this town is one of the leaders in the state in terms of getting the tax bills out. water bills, tax bills, either number one or number two of all towns in the state. Many of us, when you get your tax bill in February or March, it's like the first robin of spring because it's not due till May. But the finance department has really made an effort, which of course accelerates cash flow, accelerates payments from people that are going away for the winter, accelerates payments from commercial businesses who want to get the bill paid, and in addition have generated over $265,000 in additional revenue through negotiating higher fees with banks, in spite of the fact that, nowadays you can get a savings account of, you can get compound interest at 0.2%. Our town is doing a heck of a lot better than that. And there's many of these, but I just tried to pull out a few of them for your benefit, and not for your benefit, not for you guys, for the town's benefit. Next. Significant challenges. The first two, I'm not going to spend much time on golf because I think you've had enough golf presentations and analysis over the past year or two. We too have seen the stabilization. We've seen more focused management. We know some of the work that's being done on trying to determine what to do with the courses, what to do with the clubhouse/restaurant at Bass River. Some of the work that has to be done ultimately at Bayberry Hills. But right now, our evaluation is golf is stabilized. I would say the same thing about police overtime, which, the chief probably feels that he's in one of those movies where the hot, bright lights are flashed on the perpetrator. Overtime is always a subject. And I think we've seen some benefit through Dan's leadership of through the LOD Reserve Fund for long-term disabilities. The key issue, you can't get around it, is scheduling, the schedule process, which will take years to wash out if it ever does. But the trend right now is pretty good. The overtime is actually under budget, or I shouldn't say under budget. It's under where it was last year. And I think at the last board meeting, I think Selectman Holcomb asked the chief the difference between what's your budget, but what are you expending? And they do tend to go over their budget, but we find ways to cobble together through various sources so the budget does get balanced. But it's clearly a work in progress that we're not going to resolve overnight, but I will say on behalf of the committee that we've been satisfied with the attention that the item has gotten. Probably the most important thing I wanted to convey tonight is is the next item, which I will call the Shine a Light Initiative. What came across to us, both through sitting on some capital budget committee meetings, as well as our own committee, we see, and every one of these things has been addressed and talked about with the Board of Selectmen. Items that have been on our list for several years, that the current budget structure just doesn't seem to be able to move to completion or solution, or to determine that they're not worth solving or completing. So what we've done is try to say, let's take these items. Not going to resolve it tonight, but let's take these items and try to find a way to continue and find solutions. And as you know, for example, and the reason I say this is because the operating budget, the finance committee budgets, they're presented pretty much flat. There's not a $500,000 item that you can say, hey, let's just throw this into the operating budget. So that structure doesn't work very well. The capital budget, the levy percentage has not been increased for years, and I know it's a recommendation that's been brought up. For example, so coastal infrastructure, which several $1 million, I won't express an opinion, but it should be determined how important that is to this community to have that done. And it shouldn't linger. So the Shine a Light initiative says, and this committee will be more than glad to take the leadership with the board, with town administration, and with the capital budget committee to try to find some solutions. ME Small School, again, nothing you don't know, but do you throw $20,000, $30,000 a year at the roof, or do you say, let's have a comprehensive ME Small School solution? I wish it were easy, and you wish it were easy. Fire department staffing. Fire department study showed 4 years ago that the fire department has been understaffed. Again, something you're well aware of. It's a very slow route. Do we take a very slow process, or do we find a different type of solution? Dispatch solutions. This has been, since I've been involved here, dispatch has been an ongoing item. Right now, we even have some problems with the way 911 calls are routed, and a couple buildings that if a hurricane put them out of commission, we would have some problems. There could be a potential solution at Fire Station number 2 on the 2nd floor, but it doesn't come without a lot of work and some cost. Police, fire, and radio and equipment. I put this on because of the Capital Budget Committee meetings every year. It's like, well, we need all this, and right now there's a vendor that may be going out of business, and there's no simple solution to try to stay up with current communication technology in police and fire and other public safety. But you can't just, can you just piecemeal it? Can you say, well, you're looking for 500,000, we'll give you 100,000. So these are the kind of things I don't have solutions to tonight, but I will say some of the ways to address would be to increase the budget from the levy, fully committed multi-year funding, which means, okay, we're going to give you $250,000 this year. We will give you $250,000 next year. You don't have to come and beg again, so that you have a path to it. And even the 5-year and 10-year capital plans, to me, are more of a roadmap. This would be something that's more committed. A general obligation bond. I know that sounds really exciting with the schools and the DPW building and the other bonding, but it's definitely something to talk about. And other creative approaches, which is any number of different things. So with that, I wanted to make sure that that was considered from this standpoint of this committee, one of our highlights that we don't want to see go away, nor do you. Summary, actually, believe it or not, I used the same page I used last year. So, the town's in a very solid financial position from our standpoint. Very good debt status, almost too good. This is America. You're supposed to borrow money. High caliber town leadership. I can't tell you how impressed we continue to be. And when there's turnover, we seem to turn over with just as good, if not better, leadership. Town staying current with technology, public safety, health services, age-friendly community, the environment. Everything we hear seems to be, recognizing those issues. Finally, the challenges balancing Route 28 vision with conservation, recreation, commercial development, and even in the past year, we got the Parkers River Bridge, we got the Baxter Gristmill, we got the drive-in, and maybe someday we'll get my little dream of getting a craft brewery onto Route 28 in Yarmouth. So that's all I had. Did I miss anything, fans?
Any questions? Tracy?
I don't have any questions. Actually, I don't think, as you said, since they were here last, much has changed. There's no glaring items of large increase or... the only real question I have is you didn't talk about your approach this year. There were years that you talked about bottom-up budgeting and how it was divided. How did you approach the process this year.
I think we've seen the benefit of that, the bottom-up budgeting, because once you go through it, you can ride on it for a while. What I think was the approach this year that was a little different was the process with the department start with a mission statement. They give you some background on just more than the numbers. In a way that I guess I like to also think that we tried to make it more comfortable. We continued. We really would only like the department heads to come in one time. Any follow-ups, and there are things that tend to need 2 or 3 follow-ups, but we've been doing that with Dan and with Rich. So I would say that the presentation process, you've seen the same thing. I saw the one that the police chief and the fire chief did a couple weeks ago, and unless I'm wrong, the Board of Selectmen reacted favorably to the type of presentation and the information within it, not just the numbers. I think when you get behind the scenes, the numbers don't become as mysterious. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of drama.
Good. Well, thank you all for your hard work. I know it takes a lot of time and detail going through it, and I'm very appreciative for all that you do.
Eric?
No, thank you.
Norm? Thanks very much for your presentation. I think it's helpful to us to know that we've got a great group of people looking hard at the numbers, and gives us some comfort in moving forward with some of the policy initiatives. So I'm curious about a couple of the major challenges that you cite, the coastal infrastructure and the ME small roof and those sorts of things. I mean, do you have any further thoughts about the scale of those investments and what we could possibly be doing at this point?
ME small is I wouldn't want to get into the scale of that right now, because it's sort of, do you pour money into repair, or do you replace, or do you move it? Do you move those students somewhere else to another available building? We have not delved into it. I will say with the coastal infrastructure, based on what I've seen Carl present and heard over the past few years, I just think it's got to be done. That's what you don't want all those rocks falling into the pathways of boats, et cetera. I just think it's there's 2 components of it, and Capital can talk about a little bit more. But there's some dredging has been approved, but there's a $3 million item, and I think there's another $3 million item. I just think the numbers are correct. Mm-hmm. I just don't know. Frankly, that's where I gravitate towards, I think, a bond. Nothing's easy, but that's where I think a bond is the only solution, and put it to, the broader body. That's my thought on it.
Do you know when the last time was that the town spent substantial amounts of money in that regard?
On a bond?
On a bond.
On the coastal infrastructure?
Right.
No, I really don't. I would say it was definitely more than 5 years ago. Okay. I don't think anything's been really done dramatically in my term.
Okay, I have to confess, I frankly know very little about the details of what might be required and what the time frame might be that those assets would deteriorate or last, and if we'd be looking at a bond that would be a 10-year bond, a 25-year bond, whatever, and that was one of the reasons I asked about when was the last time we spent a significant amount of money on it.
Yeah, and that's why bonding is interesting, because if you included everything, you got to be careful. You got fire department staffing. That's head count. Right. That's not necessarily bonding oriented. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think what I wanted to do tonight was, like I say, shine a light, mm-hmm. at least keep these things alive versus it's never going to happen.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
No, I'm glad you sort of focused on this shine a light. You know, we've talked about it here on the board. I know the whole issue of how we finance the coastal improvements has come up before. I think what we need to do is just literally come up with a game plan, how we can develop a set of recommendations that we can vet openly with the community, with taxpayers, so that we can examine all our options. I would venture to say there are probably things related to coastal infrastructure looking ahead, based on some of the planning work that's going on right now, like this vulnerability initiative. There are potential projects or improvements that might be needed as a result of that planning exercise, some of the other work that's going on in terms of stormwater runoff. I'm not sure to what degree those things have been fully even programmed into our capital planning yet. I know there are a lot of studies, investigations, and work going on to sort of begin to identify what those future costs might be, but I'd like to make sure that when we look at the coastal infrastructure piece of it, we're not just looking at now, what we know now is in front of us, but also try to anticipate or at least figure out when we'll have a better handle on the future. So in the next 4 or 5 years, what are the kind of stormwater improvements we're going to be required to take advantage, to move forward on? What kind of other culverts will need to be improved upon that represent water quality issues? So looking down the road, there's a lot more cost out there that I don't believe we've got our arms around yet. I think we're getting our arms around that stuff.
Some engineering, I think, has been done, but yeah, you're right. You're talking, you know, revetments, riprap, you know, those kind of marine terms, not necessarily flow from other sources or things you can't see.
Right. No, I think we've got to work with the administration to see if we can begin to start planning out or mapping out what those other costs might be. Right. And then I think it would better serve us in terms of this kind of subject area that we dig into it once we have, I think, a better handle on not just the current costs, because I know what you're seeing is what's sort of in what we know, what's now, what's current, and what's anticipated within the next year or two. But I honestly think that with respect to this, I would recommend that maybe after town meeting we revisit this, have more discussion on it, and see how long it might take to pull together some of these other costs, these other projects, and working with DPW and the town administration. So I'm glad you're talking about this. I'm glad you, and I would recommend keep at it. So as you suggest or see other things that we may need to really continue to stay on top of, it's helpful to keep reminding us of that. And everything else, I think, with respect to your overall recommendations, I think as a board, I think we share many of them. We've seen significant improvements in a number of areas, so I appreciate you highlighting them, particularly for the people at home that might be watching. So thank you, and thanks for all your service and all the time and energy that you put into this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I too would like to thank everyone for all their hard work and your continuous efforts. I agree with Mark's comments about coastal infrastructure repairs and kind of trying to look ahead and see what we're going to be looking at in actuality by paying some more careful scrutiny to that issue. But with respect to just your approach of the Shine a Light initiative, each one of those categories that you mentioned is very, very important, and yet they keep appearing and appearing and appearing, and nothing gets done. Like the Emmy Small School, well, that is being addressed and discussed by the town, by the school department, with engineers and surveyors are out there. I mean, I think the question is, everybody knows what the problem is, that the school is in such bad repair, it's not worth it to put millions of dollars into it. But on the other hand, it's not up to standards for kids to go there. So I know Carol Woodbury's trying to get the ME Small project on the list for state reimbursement. In fact, she said during discussions relating to the K through the 4 through 7 school, said that at the time that Mattakese was designated for consideration for state funding, she thought that was the worst building in the school district, and that's why she nominated that school. But if she had to do it over again, she would have nominated the Emmy Small School because it's in even worse shape. So fire department staffing, you're right, that's come up several times. Dispatch is an old, much discussed issue that remains unresolved. So I think it's good that you're isolating those things to draw our attention and everyone else's attention to the fact that something's got to be done with these things that keep reappearing on the schedule, so to speak. Maybe develop even out of those items, what's the priority? You know, what can we afford? What, you know, what's going to require long-term financing, short-term financing, intermediate-term financing, and look at it from a standpoint of affordability.
Right.
And try to start knocking some of these things out. But thank you very much again for all your hard work and your excellent presentations. Much appreciated.
It's a great team.
I just want to say one more thing on that.
Oh, go ahead, Tracy.
I think, well, I mean, I guess we're very fortunate. We've been here long enough, some of us, to see some really, really hard times. And it's taken us many, many years to recover from that. And when you look at this budget, while we do have some needs, all of our departments have needs, but nowhere near what we had maybe 10 years ago. So, you know, those times really, really hurt us. And in some respects, it helped us for the future in terms of really, really buckling up and having to do a lot with a little. I mean, our people are absolutely amazing. But we have small ads in here, and we have been progressing with projects. We put off capital for a really long time, and we have a lot of people in our community that struggle with their taxes. So in terms of being able to make progress, I feel like we've done a really great job. We have the DPW facility. We're working on wastewater. These are huge issues for our community, and they're going to hopefully be least impactful while we continue to work on some of these other issues. So I'm really, really happy that we're able to make some progress, where in years we had to make cuts. And we've been in a situation many, many years we had to make cuts, and we're not there this year. So that's a good thing.
Okay. Move on to capital budget. Thank you.
Here we go again.
Might need you again.
Can't you turn it?
Yeah, it's equal on both sides.
Yeah, but you can adjust it.
Good. See how it comes out.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Fife. I am the chairman of the Capital Budget Committee, and I'd like to introduce my committee. On my left is Joanne Crowley. She's the representative from the Planning Board. And then we have Bob Ciavara. He is from the FinCom. He's behind me. Kurt Sears, Kathy Heisel, Judy Tarver, and Lindsay Petro. First, I'd like to thank the department heads for all their input this year. They did a great job. They're all very proactive, looking for grant funding, and we appreciate that. And I also want to say thank you to Rich for all the hard work that he's done this year. Oh, sorry. I have to figure out how to work this thing. So each year we start our year with the recommendations from the Board of Selectmen and guidance on your goals and your objectives for the year. The town administrator asked the department heads to set their calendars, and then we receive their submission. So we review each request and meet with each department. We actually go out into the departments, and we have a liaison for each department that actually looks at equipment. The departments come in and present their requests, and then we prioritize and present to the Finance Committee, which we've already done, and then our recommendations to the board. So we start in September, and we go through April. So we did a presentation to you in January, and this is our second presentation, and we'll do our final presentation in March. So looking at 2021 at a glance, we received 60 requests this year, approximately, and for $21.7 million. We were able to recommend 31% of the overall projects, but only 26% of items coming from the levy limit. After our review, you allocate 1.5 from the levy. From that we do not have any funds left over this year to put into the capital stabilization fund. On the right, you'll see just a breakdown, which I will go through as on the larger slides, of the breakdown of the source of fundings and what we recommended. So this is a very small list that we did update the board on in January. We recommend 22 items from the tax levy. This list is available on the website under the Capital Committee. I'm not going to go through each line item. I did that in January, and we will be coming back in March to give you a breakdown on each item. But the total is $1,502,105 from the levy. We continue to support infrastructure improvements from the various departments. From the water department, they asked for 6 items for a total of $2,120,000. And on roadways, there's 2 items, one for roadways improvement and one from stormwater. You see these items each year, so we recommend both those. Roadways is $1.5 million. We also reviewed items from other funding sources. From the fire department, we recommend 4 items from the ambulance receipts for a total of $495,000. From recycling revenue, we did talk about this in January. We did get information on the pad at the sanitation department, and we are recommending the engineering design. That is a change from when we came in January for that C&D pad. It's not the whole project, it's just the engineering and design. And from FEMA money, there are 2 items recommended: town hall insulation and the roof repair over at the Bridgewater University building. We had 5 items from free cash that we recommend to come from free cash. They are more operating in nature and they're non-recurring. And so we did recommend that the board review those from the free cash allocation. So this year, we have a total recommendation of $6,112,661, as mentioned by the Finance Committee. We do have some items that we were not able to recommend, and some of these were because we felt that it needed more discussion on the board level, or we needed more information, or they were drawn. Some large capital projects that you just had a discussion on that were deferred were the Run Pond project for $3,787,000. Coastal infrastructure of $15 million, and the Sandy Pond renovation for $3.4 million. So those were deferred. They're outside the scope of what the Capital Outlay Committee can recommend without more funding sources. So as required by the charter, we do give you a 5-year capital plan. This is based on the items that the department heads have put in their 5-year plan. We would like to see more 5-year plan from the school. We only see their current recommendations. We don't see any out years from the school department. So it the 5-year plan might be more accurate if we could get more accurate numbers. 10-year plan is more facility-based. These are larger projects that definitely need more vetting from the board. So each year we go through our challenges. Some of them were mentioned by the Finance Committee tonight already. We often see operating expenses bundled and presented as capital. We recommend that some capital funds, but smaller items, be put back into the budget. They probably were in the budget 10 years ago, but now they've been cut. So that would be something that you could look at. Projects presented in advance of organizational and policy decisions. We see those each year, and they need more discussion. And as we always ask for our routine capital to be increased by 2.5%, like the roads are, we are losing ground each year when we receive the same amount. Possible creation of an annual appropriation for waterways that was discussed a short time ago for those big projects. Possible creation of a bundled bond issue for larger projects we can't afford to allocate from the $1.5 million. This year we did use the condition assessment information from the department heads, which was the vehicle rating system, which was a big help. And this year, this summer, we will be looking on updating the current vehicle replacement policy. So with that, we'll entertain more questions. As I said, this is posted on the website for the public, and we will give you more details at the public hearing in March.
Thank you very much. I realize that this is your second time here, and there will be a third, so I won't try to be too long here. Bridgewater, $200,000. What is the FEMA Disaster Reimbursement Fund? I'm not familiar with that. I know that this has been mentioned briefly before, but I don't recall seeing that heading before.
Yeah, so over the years, we get a very delayed response from typically FEMA money or that comes through. Like just recently, we took application for, I think it was $36,000 from a 2013 snowstorm event that FEMA just finally got around to working the paperwork through. So there's a fund that has been generated or created at Finance that this insurance reimbursement money, if you will, has collected in from all these different storms over the years. And it's at the point now where it has enough money to cover the town hall insulation issue that is related directly to 2 water pipe breaks, and remaining issue with the BSU roof.
Okay. All right. I think that at some point, we should probably have an agenda item this summer over what's going to happen to that building long term.
At BSU?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that might really be good timing. I can't really speak with too much detail on it, but there might be interesting development related to something that was in the paper with BSU and a prospective partner. So it could be very good news for us.
Right. Good. And my second question was, it seems to me that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we allocated money for police body cameras, and I seem to recall that they were either purchased and not used, or the money was held in anticipation of contract negotiations. Is that correct?
Since I've been here, we have not had a contract negotiation on that. All of the camera issues associated with the police would be related to, you'd have to have a contract agreement in place before you could even
Didn't we either purchase some or allocate some money to purchase some?
No, there was no appropriation.
There was never an appropriation?
For body cameras. There could have been some surveillance cameras or cameras for other parts of the building.
There were
but
some
no-
surveillance cameras a few years ago.
No body cameras.
There were cruiser
They were
cameras.
requested.
Correct.
No cruiser
Requested-
cameras.
They may have been requested and withdrawn.
Yeah, we've requested it for like the past 5 years.
Yeah.
It's a big ticket item.
I thought we had acted on it once, but apparently.
Nope.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
But just to follow up, if you don't mind, that's one of the, for Sandy kind of touched on this, those are requests, those requests shouldn't get out ahead of contract negotiations. Things like that that have impact on collective bargaining units should be deliberated at the board level to give us authorization to engage, and if we get through a negotiation agreement to do that, then we can talk about funding. It's kind of premature to put the funding up there because it could take years to get through negotiations to get those items to over the finish line.
Just for the record, the supervisor's contract does allow for that.
It allows for the wearing of body cameras?
Yes, it
So
does.
it's already been negotiated?
For supervisors, yes.
And did we attempt to get that language in the patrolman's contract?
We have.
And it was not successful?
Was not.
Okay. Yeah, I'll bite my tongue. That's all I have. Thank you.
Tracy?
No, I think that those are very important items of discussion, and I think that, we should really weigh, and maybe in our case, not I gotta be careful what I say. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one alone. I think that between our police chief and our administration, that they will work through that issue. But perhaps it's something that we need to invest in somehow, finding a way to do it if it's allowed for. Because potentially that could have savings to the town in terms of liability and potential litigation that could arise from an issue. I'm not saying that happens, that has happened, I'm just saying in general, it could be helpful. So, kudos to the sergeants. We've seen this before, it's a lot of the same. My one question was, you had made an addition, you mentioned that you had made a couple of changes since we were here last. What did you reduce in order to achieve items that you did add?
We did, I don't have the prior list, but I know the items that changed were the tasers.
The what?
Taser replacement program under the police. We did support their 5-year plan. So this item, we have $27,960. You're going to see that for the next 4 years. Might not be exactly that amount, but it'll be close to that amount. So that is one item that we changed. Under natural resources, we added a vehicle. He came in and asked us to reduce the permitting on the Fish Reef project because he was able to get some grant money for that, and made a good case on why we should add back one of the vehicles we didn't recommend based on its condition. So that is a change.
And what was the rating? Were we able to see the rating on that vehicle that was added back? What, in your
we did rate it in A.
Okay.
Let me see, I think those were the only changes that we had. Am I missing anything? Oh, the C&D pad, as I mentioned, we were waiting on information from Jeff on that. So we did put in the $50,000 for the design and engineering to repair the pad. So that was it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks for the work you've done on this. I do have a question. It looks like the detail here is broken down into two sections. One is capital improvements, and then there's a 10-year capital facility plan.
Yes.
And, you know, I think I'm taken aback a little bit by the scale of that, and I'm wondering what the source of it is.
That comes strictly from the department heads or from administration on the 10-year plan. They're more large facility items that, the 5 years come from, our recommendation is for 2021. 2020 is what we adopted last year, but the next 4 years came from the department heads.
Okay, so the 10-year plan, well, it actually goes out, yeah, it is a 10-year plan. For example, it's at $18 million for a fire department building. Phase 2, $52 million of a public works facility. You know, and I guess some of these I have no idea what they're about. So, you know, I guess I'm not sure that it's the job of the capital committee to present those to the, what's that?
They said it's a it's the wastewater. It looks like it's public works, but it's the wastewater infrastructure, so that's the next phase, the wastewater.
I believe the charter says we have to present that, but it is put together by administration.
Understand, okay. Okay. I'm just, you know, looking at this, and I guess I'd look for some presentation on what these items represent, so that we have more idea of what our potential future commitments might be. And I'm not saying that's up to the capital committee. I think it's up to the administration at this point. If the recommendations have come from the department heads, then I think that as part of a 10-year planning process, we need to know what's on the, in the details of these. Mark?
No, I join with my fellow board members in thanking you for all your hard work.
You're welcome.
On behalf of the town. I generally am very supportive of your recommendations. I just want to touch on a few items. I want to follow up on Eric's query regarding this FEMA disaster reimbursement fund. Does anybody know exactly what it was that we sought reimbursement for?
It was a storm, 2013 storm.
Well, no, there's a variety of storms. So what happens is, like in this particular case, sometimes the storm occurred in 2013, and there's a declaration made that you become eligible for. That wasn't all the money. That was just a recent case. So this has been an accumulation of funds that have trickled back to the town over the course of many years, I assume, and have just been put aside as they've come in and has not been spent. So they've accumulated themselves, you know.
So is the $250,000 the full amount of the fund, or how much?
That I don't. Ed Centeo he'll be here. If he's not here already, he might have a.
He's here.
Do you know how much is in the so-called FEMA disaster reimbursement fund?
Yes, it's over at $300,000.
Over $300,000.
Hurricane Sandy.
It was Sandy?
One of the funds that we received. And then there was an ice storm that was...
So we're going back, what, how many years? 3 or 4 years?
Sandy is 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we got...
No, I know in Massachusetts, for the communities that were looking for help with the 15 blizzards and the huge storm assistance, it took them at least 3 or 4 years. I think last year they finally got some partial reimbursement on that.
Yeah, it's as...
So I'm just curious what, if anything, do we have anything still outstanding of any significance?
We'll have the tornado money.
You're right.
Tornado money?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's all I believe is outstanding.
Yeah.
We had to resubmit some information 2 years ago, and then we finally started to get money this fiscal year, so it's built up, and you know, this is an opportunity to use it to deal with some storm-related issues.
I got it. Thanks. The next question I have has to do with the town clerk, the voting tabulators. Is this the same piece of equipment that we had discussed and presented at town meeting before? Was it last year or the year before? Or is there something else going?
That was to count votes at the
Oh, the vote
town
counting
meeting.
thing. Okay, these are
what
are these?
The 7 devices that we have to have in each of the precincts.
Okay.
And we can't replace them one at a time. We have to replace all of the voting machines all at once.
Got it.
So, but I think there was some issues with,
there was
you know,
an app
maybe you could replace that equipment one each year over several years.
I just want to make
and
sure I
we
was
really can't do
interpreting this as the same thing, but
No,
it
it is
has
not the
nothing to do
same.
with that. Okay.
It is not the
Because I
same.
thought we had pretty much resolved that.
Resolved it.
Huh?
What do you mean by resolved it?
I think the town meeting stripped the money out, or with the money,
Oh, it was
they voted
withdrawn.
against it. Was it
The
withdrawn?
capital budget
Pulled
voted
it out.
against it, wasn't even,
Yeah.
I don't think it was put forward to town meeting for a request.
thought it was.
Yeah, there was discussion on the floor. I think someone tried to
thought they
That
amend
was
it.
for the electronic vote
That's what I mean.
Yes.
for
That's what I mean.
town meeting.
For town meeting.
Correct. I just want to make sure I wasn't confusing the two items, that this was something separate, something different, that's all.
I thought there was an app for this kind of stuff now.
No, it's in Iowa.
We don't want that
Brought
out.
it there. The other question I have has to deal with the Channel 18 infrastructure upgrade. I guess there was some discussion of the need to upgrade it. We're looking at roughly $175,000. We do have Comcast license money that's supposed to be used for operations and capital. So I'm just curious why was this withdrawn, or
That
was
was
it?
withdrawn. We have to let Rich speak to that. That was withdrawn.
Yeah, we're actually undergoing our license renewal negotiations now. We have a capital plan that's been presented to Comcast. We haven't actually started discussions, but we've been preparing a lot of the materials, including a capital plan, so I have quotes on redoing the whole control room and the facilities, the cameras, adding up to about $185,000, I think it is. And we're optimistic that we're going to get funding to pay for all that through our licensing agreement renegotiation. So hopefully that will happen by the end of this year. The agreement is up in May of 2021, I think it is. So we're endeavoring to complete the negotiations in 2020 so that by the end of the year we could implement that equipment.
So you're hoping that this number will be updated, revised, and then out of the negotiations with Comcast, the money will be sought through those negotiations as opposed to?
Yes.
Because I'm assuming that when this was proposed or put in there, are we actually aligning the Comcast money and tracking the capital expenses that we're using, or the expenses, and offsetting those with our Comcast revenues? I'm just trying to get a sense of how that's being accounted for, because I'm assuming that, I mean, the Comcast contract is supposed to be for operations and equipment, and so I'm just curious how we're tracking the equipment expenditures.
Yeah, hasn't been a clear-cut practice or policy in the past.
I see.
That was one of the things that I mentioned to you in our budget presentation, that once we get through these negotiations and some of the funding I asked for this year, is kind of working towards perhaps next year doing something a little bit more, something that you're a little bit more familiar with in other communities perhaps, where you do have a separate cable access fund that supports the operation and the capital reinvestment of that operation. So that's something we'd be working towards.
Does any of this work relate to the recent outages of Channel 18? As you know, the station's been dark quite a bit.
It would be, yeah.
Oh, it would be. So as you revise this and provide that
I mean,
information.
we're not going to wait to get this to fix it, but obviously we will get modern, new equipment as opposed to having 10-plus-year-old equipment that we have to replace when it breaks.
So everyone agrees there's a sense of urgency behind this, because it just seems like, you know, for a while the quality was bad, then something happened to fix it. You figured out some way, maybe it was you out on the pole somewhere.
Some tinfoil was added to it.
Fixing the wire. But then it improved, and it improved significantly. Then lately it's been like it's dark. Now I appreciate not having to watch the sex offender stuff on a regular basis.
We have a YouTube channel. You can go to
the YouTube. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think that's part of the administration's game plan, is to have alternatives and other outlets to access information in terms of meetings. But I'm just curious. We've got literally Channel 18 is
Started that.
What's that?
I found the YouTube channel recently.
You did?
I did.
And what'd you think?
It's titillating.
I'm not sure I'd use that adjective, but I'll take your word for
But
it.
just to reiterate, you had asked the question, I don't know if I fully answered it. Our cable franchise money, which is about $520,000
Yep.
in actual receipts,
Yep.
in which we are pretty much budgeting that full amount, goes to the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
We've been cutting that back, anticipating that in the long term,
Right.
cable franchise fees will be
Yeah.
decreasing.
Right.
And so now in the budget you have in front of you for this FY21, cable franchise fees budgeted in the general fund are $400,000.
Right.
We're still receiving over $500. But that differential, and as that differential gets bigger, will allow us, to move some of that money to a separate fund without
Right.
impacting the general fund operation.
Yeah.
And then the capital money we get, we share with the DUI school district. So we only get it every other year.
Mm-hmm.
In the off years, Dennis sends the money to the district.
Right.
And that's a relatively short amount of money, about $24,000.
Thanks, Rich.
Can we go back to the tabulators for a second? Because they are on here for this year, so they have not been dispensed of. I think one of the interesting parts in what we had been through the last time it was recommended, there was nobody really that was recommending it other than myself. But anyway, since then, we have done a survey. And there was quite a few people in our survey about attendance at town meeting that were very much in favor of the tabulators.
In
And
the surveys.
In the surveys.
But then they didn't vote for it when it was amended.
Well, it wasn't recommended by anybody at that point in time. And the other thing is, well, I'll let Ed speak, but
What is on the list
Yes.
for a capital, or it's going to be, I think,
free
a free
cash,
cash
yes.
request, are the voting machines.
it says tabulators and booths.
That's what they're called.
So
The
it's
tabula-
That's not the.
You're still going back to the
Yeah,
town meeting
I-
things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But there was a
confusing.
Apples and oranges.
recommendation from the committee. Am I wrong? Was there a committee about attendance at town meeting?
There was a
counted.
committee, and we
Yeah,
did develop a
that's
survey. I don't recall offhand on that particular topic how that outcome was.
Well, I wish that we'd reconsider it, because after last year's town meeting and the hand counts, it would have been very helpful and reduced the time of town meeting significantly, which is an issue as to why people don't attend. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, to add to your 2 cents, the surveys actually showed interest and support for it.
Yes, correct.
But the same people that did the surveys also voted against
They perhaps were not at town meeting.
the money for it. No, they were there. No, that's the thing that I found ultimately ironic about the whole thing, is that here we did a survey to get people's insights in terms of what they think could be done to improve attendance. This was on it. It got a lot of support, but when it came up as, I believe, an amendment to one of the articles, it was shot down fairly
It was
decisively.
not supported by the Capital Budget Committee, but I'm not sure anybody was there to present their
Yeah.
position on that to you when it was recommended to you. Was there?
No, it came in late. Yeah, that was.
So it was it wasn't done, I don't think it was vetted
Should have been
properly.
it should have been given more due and more attention. Is that what you're saying?
Might have come in as part of a free cash article.
Yes, it was part of free cash.
Yeah.
It came in late.
Okay, that concludes my questions.
But I
Thank you.
remember it was discussed, and it was voted upon.
It's like Norman and golf, I'm on it.
And your splash pad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So any other questions?
Surprised you didn't ask about the splash pad.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
but
Okay.
I'm telling you,
All
by
right.
next year, we're.
Just thought,
doing it.
No. All right. I want to thank you, as well as the other board members, for all your diligence and hard work. I don't have any additional questions. I think we're ready to move on to free cash items.
All right, we'll see you in March. Thank you. Thank you. Listen to free cash, and I'm going home.
So Rich has prepared some updated documents for you before we get to the free cash items, just to kind of give you an update as to where some movement occurred recently in the budget based on feedback we received.
And this would include free cash at the end of this, but we did want to update you. You received the budget books with the budget detail reports and budget summary reports in those. And as we go through, of course, the time, of course, things change. Oh, excuse me. One of the biggest changes, or the biggest change that you are already aware of, is we did get good news from the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group with our insurance premiums not going up at all. We had planned on up to 10%, as well as better than anticipated assessment for Barnstable County retirement system. So that first line that's highlighted, the $448,000, reflects a reduction for those two items. So we're budgeting no increase in health insurance and a less of an increase in county retirement. Also, we revisited the request on a media coordinator. And you'll see in free cash, I've updated the request for free cash, but we've dropped it from the operating budget for now. In addition, we did get a preliminary budget from DY and Cape Cod Tech, and the result of those assessments resulted in an increase over the 2.5% amount that was already provided for of another $388,000. Capital Budget Committee had a adjustment at the end of their process, so that dropped to $3,500. And then the final item is through the budget presentations by departments to the Finance Committee and indications of needs from the various departments. The Police Department has additional funding. Is now a contractual requirement, and in addition to actual new hires, requiring uniforms. So there's additional money in there added for uniforms, as well as ammunition costs that hadn't been provided for additional training.
There's also a new, I think it's a printer copier lease that they secured. Yeah.
And so the bottom line to all of that is, since we originally presented the budget and distributed the budget books, the budget has dropped $115,000. The net result of all of that. So on the next page, on the next slide, how does that impact the budget? Well, we still have a balanced budget. And you can see that as a result of that, we also did get additional information on our state and county aid and assessments. Our assessments from the state went up $17,000 from what we had originally planned for. This is under the governor's current proposal, which isn't final, what we finally might get, but it's what the guidance we have now. Likewise, our state receipts went up $37,000, so we've added that into the mix. Up above here, you see the $115,000 from the prior page being reduced from our appropriations. Following up with Selectman Holcomb, he brought up a good point on some of his questions. We had talked and presented to you a plan to remove some of the salaries from enterprise funds and put them in the operating budgets where it was more appropriate to put them. And in the slides that we showed you, we didn't quite offset that full cost by increasing indirect cost to the enterprise funds, and we have now done so. So now all the salaries that were enterprise funds that are now in the general fund are funded, so to speak, by increased indirect charges to the enterprise funds dollar for dollar. So the result of all that is a reduction of the tax levy of almost $200,000, and we still have a balanced budget. And we do have a little bit.
Rich, just so the 199,000, is that a sum of the 97, the 37, and the 64? Is that?
Well, if the total amount to be raised goes down 97,972, then the amount of funding needs to go down the same amount. If you're increasing, however, 2 out of the 4 elements of funding, you can reduce the property tax greater than that net amount that's being asked to be dropped out of the budget. So it's a sum of, we need to reduce $97,972, but we've added 37 and we've added 64, so we can reduce the property tax greater than the amount of the $97,000 reduction.
Okay, thank you.
We do have an excess levy capacity. I didn't show a presentation of it, but we do have some capacity to handle any further late-breaking changes. It's not a ton of money, but we're able to handle anything that comes up in the next month or two. Which brings us to the free cash. It's a similar list that was previously presented to you, but I've highlighted where there's been changes. Year-end reserve, we had some additional needs that have come to our attention since November, December, when it first got put together. And at this point, we wanted to try to accommodate some of those requests. And so one of the ways we were able to do that is by reducing the amount that we have set aside for a year-end reserve was $450,000, is now $425,000, reflecting the fact that we're almost to March and it hasn't snowed yet. So keep your fingers crossed. But we do anticipate having a need on the C&D, increased costs, increased volume coming in. We're generating the revenues associated with that increased volume, but the appropriation that was set for this fiscal year wasn't sufficient, and so we'd seek funding at Article 1 of our town meeting. And as you might recall, we've put this $350,000 in the budget for FY21, so we don't have to keep doing this. But in any event, we do need to have a need for a reserve for year-end to handle any last-minute or end-of-year issues. But we're reducing that a little bit, and essentially that's going into vehicle equipment and maintenance. We do have some specific needs, primarily from the fire department. We have been appropriating $100,000 under the direction of the DPW to coordinate some vehicle maintenance issues, but we do have some large vehicle repairs through FD that need to be addressed to keep vehicles on the road and in operation. And so that's an attempt to do that. I did reduce the OPEB funding just slightly. We're still funding our annual required contribution, and probably by a couple $1,000s more, but I was just trying to shave off a couple bucks to fund a few items. Another item would be the fire department roof at Station 2, I'm sorry, the north side. It does need some repair, and so that some of these changes provide for those repairs. We don't think we need, ultimately there may be a need for up to $150,000 for the LCP work, but it certainly isn't all needed right now today. This is a process that might go over the course of a couple years, and so we took a little bit of money out of that. We didn't feel the need that we had to designate the full amount when it's a multi-year process when we had other needs, and so that reduction funded other changes, and particularly you see the media operations improvement request went from $30,000 to $50,000, reflecting that it's no longer in the operating budget, and the path that would probably be looking to pursue is trying to get a vendor, and I've got one or two in mind that I'm trying to meet with in the near term to bring them on board and see what kind of agreement we could come to have them work on a part-time basis to get our media operation up and running, and perhaps assist us when we're selecting equipment once we settle our contract with Comcast and set up our new, what the new operation looks like. And that pilot activity might provide the confidence that this board might need in funding it in a different manner going forward. And I believe that's all the changes. The bottom line is over here on the right. We still have the same amount that we had available, $3,419,000. We've committed at this point $3,414,000, and we've got just under $5,000 left available.
Rich, I have a question regarding the wastewater planning, the $200,000. What is that for? And who is in charge of spending that money?
Jeff Colby, the DPW director, is responsible for that article. It's the same article we've had for a few years now. Regardless of what happens with our wastewater planning issues with DHY or Yarmouth only, building a plant in Phase 1 collection system, we have a need, whether we do that or not, we have a need to do ongoing planning and update our comprehensive wastewater management plan and certain filings associated with that. And I know Jeff has a budget that's associated with that $200,000 of what that represents, the scope of work.
Okay. And what is the wastewater capital reserve?
Where is that going?
So as you recall, this is one of the articles that will be up for discussion as we move forward. There is a proposed water resource enterprise fund, which would be the kind of a holding mechanism for all wastewater funding until we actually have debt service costs that we have to pay with from that. And so within that enterprise fund would be a capital fund, so to speak. And for this fiscal year, we had carved it out as a separate article since it's a new item where all the elements in the funding plan for wastewater were identified will be in that article. That includes the solar PV savings, short-term rental revenues, new short-term rental revenues, this element, and there's one other item I'm missing, but a total about $1.6 million, which would go into the Water Resource Enterprise Fund capital account for wastewater.
So is this going to is the enterprise fund going to be a separate enterprise account? Just similar to golf, similar to, is that going to represent the combination of water and wastewater and stormwater?
That's correct.
That's being voted on?
Right.
Okay. So
it doesn't necessarily, although it's presented here as such, would be put into a capital fund within that enterprise fund, a capital account within that enterprise fund. Guess it doesn't necessarily say that it goes to wastewater, but that seems to be the intention here at this point.
Yeah. I have to voice my displeasure with that at this stage, and I've spoken about it before. These are funds in our general fund and being used to fund a wastewater project. The analogy would be to other utilities. If you're an electric utility, people who are not on the grid don't have to pay for that electricity, and the same thing applies to wastewater. People who are not participating in that should not have to pay for it. Same thing applies to water. In many communities, not here, in many communities, there are people who are on wells. They don't necessarily have to contribute to the parts of the community that have town water. And I don't think that setting a precedent of applying general funds to wastewater is a good precedent for our community. I think we ought to wait until we have a complete picture of the sources of funding for wastewater before we apply any town funds to this. And I just think it's premature, and it establishes a precedent that I think is inappropriate.
So I guess a lot of what you said, there's a lot of policy discussion that obviously we'll let the board have that discussion, but in just a factual point I'd like to raise, but also an alternative is, as you know, we've got a lot of needs, and so whether it goes to a wastewater reserve or a capital reserve or unrestricted stabilization, the bottom line is being set aside to finance a future project. I think you have those choices in front of you. As to the not really policy issue, but the statement, because we've heard this before and we've had this discussion of the Water Resource Advisory Committee, the question of people that are hooked up to the system versus not hooked up to the system. And then certainly is going to be an element of that there certainly are people that would never have to hook up. But one of the things that we'd like people to keep in mind is the footprint of the ultimate sewer area that's been identified to meet the nitrogen loading removal requirements was designed in such a manner that it's affecting the high-density areas first, because you get the most bang for the buck. It keeps your costs low. So it doesn't mean, because if you're not in a potential sewer area, doesn't mean you haven't contributed to the problem. It just means, the nitrogen problem, so to speak, just means that the most cost-effective way to address it wasn't to go into that neighborhood because it was a bit off. So there's a fine point there somewhere about whether you're on the system or not. The rest of it is certainly a policy discussion for the board to address.
Well, we can get into the whole discussion. I mean, if you live in Dennis, you're gonna, even though you may be benefiting by Yarmouth system, essentially.
Right, because these watersheds don't go by town borders, right?
I'm not talking about the DY plant. I'm talking about benefit to the waters of Dennis and shared waters with Yarmouth. They're not paying for our system. And the same analogy applies to other areas of Yarmouth that are not being affected by the wastewater plant. And again, I just think that it's a very poor precedent to set to, at this point, apply money. I think that we ought to be looking for ways for the users of the system to fund the plant. One of the things that I brought up just in the last couple of days is the Yarmouth-only option shows $700 and some odd thousand coming in from capital. What is the term, Rich? The capital assessment to the wastewater users. The DY option, because the operating costs of the system are lower, the DY option shows the capital contribution being $200,000 annually less. Now, why should the capital contribution of the users be less under the DY option simply because the operating costs of the system are going down? That's not right, because that $200,000 has to be funded someplace. And the issue there is that ultimately it may come down to the only way to recover that $200,000 is to go to the general fund. And again, we have so many demands on our general fund at this point. And so many things that are increasing our tax rate. We have to be very concerned about what we're doing with general fund expenditures.
Just a couple of follow-up points. I got your email, and I did respond to that just before this meeting, so you haven't had a chance to see that response back on that question. So you do have that. But that being said, and part of that response was, in either scenario, just to be clear, DHY option, Tiny Yarmouth only option, the funding sources identified, despite, or inclusive of your comments of, it's $200,000 less than one option versus another, both scenarios are funded without tax rate impact.
Understand, but the users of the...
Mr. Chairman, can we get back to a free cash discussion? I mean, this is an entirely separate wastewater discussion.
And your point's well taken. There's going to be opportunity, I think, to debate this philosophically, and I don't follow that logic at all. I think, as
So
Rich,
when is the discussion going to occur? We've had this presentation previously.
Let's get it on the agenda.
Well, and you've made your point. You've made your point. We've heard it. I think we all disagree with it.
You don't want one nickel of general fund money to support the solution to clean up Parkers River, Bass River, or Lewis Bay. Because that's really what this is about. It isn't who's using the septic system. There is major environmental damage that has to be cleaned up in the town of Yarmouth. And you're telling me that those people who are not going to be a part of the system have not contributed to that nitrogen problem?
I don't think they have.
It's not logical to assume that.
I don't think they have.
They use facilities on the south side of the Cape.
That's a stretch. There are
Cape.
people in other parts of the state that use those facilities. I mean, that's to continually draw on that.
The other thing,
because
the other thing is if there's enhanced growth in revenue that comes about as a result of running the pipe down Route 28, are those taxes going to be set aside to benefit only the people who are part of the solution? No, that's not going to happen.
I think that's what's proposed. If you look at the funding proposal that Rich has presented, that's what's proposed.
But in any event, Eric's point is well taken. Let's get back to talking about free cash. If you want to get a wastewater discussion, Dan, contact me. Let me know when you think we can get something on and talk about that.
Relative to the free cash discussion, and as far as information that might guide your decision making, the $500,000 here on wastewater capital reserve is not part of the funding plan recommended. It would be an additional amount that would basically jumpstart the pre-funding phase, but is not part of what's been identified as needed to meet the funding requirements.
Okay.
Take that.
Kid alarm.
Do you have any more?
And I guess my only other point was you do have the option, pending your discussion, of reallocating that item to another reserve if you found, or any other purpose you found fit to do as well.
Can I ask a question related to the substance abuse awareness amount of $25,000? What is the intended use for those funds?
So when Inspectional Services comes in front of you in an upcoming meeting, Bruce Murphy, the Director of Health, will explain that he's been working with outreach groups. That's part of his funding that makes some of our social net here, and he'll have a more detailed explanation of what he's trying to have a more robust presence in that arena. Obviously, it's something that is a challenge to every community, and I think he's come up with a pretty creative way.
Well, I was very impressed with the update that we had the last time he was there talking about this issue, and I just want to make sure that this includes the continuation of
absolutely.
School counseling and the partnership with Duffy.
I think what he'll explain to you is that there's an opportunity to even have a more robust social net associated with that request. Yeah.
And so it would increase some of the human services funding that he provides for out of that department.
Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, in thinking ahead towards the public hearing, I have my first question is the local comprehensive plan. If 120,000 represents a year of a multi-year process, is this 1 year's cost, or is this 3 years' cost, and then we'll be expected to appropriate more money in 3 years?
No, Kathy and Karen had done quite a bit of work on looking at the costs it's been in other communities for the consulting work associated with the LCP, and the $150,000 represented what they thought would take to get the job done over a multi-year period.
Okay.
I could have reduced this to just the 1 year costs, but I didn't need to, so I figured we would appropriate, but we could certainly do that. But the hope would be that we could end up getting it done for less than the 150, because that was an estimate from what other communities have appropriated, and perhaps we don't necessarily need to do that once we get into it. And Kathy is pretty productive and has a good skill set for this type of thing, and can take a lot, perhaps would take on some of the work that would reduce the cost as well. So.
Well, I'm glad you brought up getting it done for less, because, several years ago, Dan, you haven't enjoyed one of my LCP rants. The county was supposed to do this for us. If you recall, being a former planning board member, this was always something that was high on my priority list, and it was always a can that got kicked down the road because it was a lot of work and there was always something better to do. So several years ago, the county jumped in and offered their help, and I think all that's been done since then is to kind of adopt a few of the county's sections and sort of customize them to fit Yarmouth's needs. So I'm wondering what happened to the idea of the county doing this for us. I'm wondering what the $150,000 buys us, or $120 now, because I had thought that this would have been able to have been something that could have been done in-house, and certainly between in-house staff and county staff. So again, I'd like to know what we're getting for our $120,000. I'd also like to see a light at the end of the tunnel. When is this going to be done? Because I've been on this board a long time, and it never seems to go anywhere. So I would like a plan for my $120,000, and I would like to know that it's going to be completed and when it's going to be completed. My second question is more of a, I don't know what it is, but I'm looking at this list, and at least half of this list probably came from capital budget, and maybe CPC, and what, if we're honest with ourselves, I think we could admit that things that end up here are things that get kicked here from other committees because they were either denied or there isn't funding available. So I'm kind of wondering what the advantage is to getting $3.4 million of free cash per year and funding those things this way, or trying to fund the capital budget committee at a higher level. So, I suppose the advantage to this board is that, we can have control over the things that capital budget doesn't have the money to fund, and when they get kicked here, we can make the ultimate decision of whether or not to fund them. But I'd like maybe a little bit of a broader discussion about doing what the Capital Budget Committee requests and increasing their budget, if not by the 2.5% yearly, by some other number, perhaps in anticipation. I don't know how far out you can project what you're going to get in free cash. I think we've seen projections out as far as 3 years in the past, but maybe not, but I seem to recall some kind of projections that have been done. So I think we should entertain that idea of funding capital budget at a little bit of a higher level.
What we could do, to that point, is usually early in the fall, because the tax rate is set so quickly here and the accounts are reconciled. We have, I think is mid-October, we have the free cash number available. We could roll into the budget instructions, after it goes to the board, say, like, as a for instance for this year, say, $500,000 carve out from the free cash appropriation this year would be sent over to capital budget to do that. And you could make that decision early on in the budgeting process before they get underway, and it could be done every year is when you do have productive amounts of free cash. That's certainly something I think would be, based on what I've seen since I've been here, an easy enough way to do what you're trying to explain to do and move it over to them, but they would have the confidence to know they have X amount of dollars going into that process more.
And we could determine that in October?
Probably in October, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think, again, some of these things probably came from our kickbacks or from capital budget. So, I guess when we get to the point of having a broader discussion on that, I would like to hear some of the pros and cons of the two different ways of doing it. Maybe there aren't any, really. Maybe it's easier for us. It gives them more flexibility in doing their job for us to just say, okay, in anticipation. And we could do what we've done for other stabilization funds. I think for there was one other one that we did as a percentage. Didn't we allocate a percentage of free cash per year? What was the other? So many things in my head, they get lost.
We add the 2.5% to the override figure for roads.
Well, so if, and I gotta, so we had a beach stabilization fund.
A beach stabilization?
From a couple years ago, and we added, It was, I believe, if I recall correctly, Jeff, you can help me, was it
$5.
$5 for the non-resident beach passes? Money would go into that fund to start collecting it like that. I mean, so there's different ways to get to where you want to go with that.
I'd like to give some thought to maybe a percentage. That way, if the free cash dips in a certain year, we're not committed to a number. It's rather tied to a percentage of our available free cash. But again, that's something that we've got a busy couple months ahead of us, and I don't want to get bogged down with things like that. But I think that perhaps that's a discussion to have for the summertime in anticipation of the fall free cash.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, it does seem kind of odd that we're spending, $200, $300, $400,000 for a variety of items and putting $250 into capital stabilization. I mean, I don't understand why we're doing both. And why we wouldn't simply say to the Capital Committee, come back with recommendations for use of the Capital Stabilization Fund. I mean, because that would then give them the authorization to recommend those items to be covered out of that.
I just want to make sure we procured a sound system. Has that been accomplished?
Rich could probably speak better to this, but I believe we worked out the problems in the past with the sound system, so it worked out great recently.
The last couple times we've used the sound system has worked. You have to speak into the microphone.
We found it to be a user error.
The number that's going into our reserves, right?
The wastewater?
No, this one here. This one's going into our reserves, right? What's our balance after we put that in?
Oh, I don't know.
Mark, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Rich, thanks again for the update. This is very, very helpful. And I agree with Eric. I think some of the questions he raised in terms of structurally looking at this are worth a separate agenda item and an opportunity to discuss, at a future meeting. I think it makes a great deal of sense to look at this. With respect to the visioning in the LCP, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but didn't we get a briefing? We had actually a more expansive discussion of this at a prior meeting.
We had
a plan, I think, given to us.
That was for the visioning.
The visioning, okay. But what we need at this point is something a little bit more detailed. I share Eric's caution as well about putting. I mean, I know what the exercise is that we're doing. We're looking at possible places where we can plug some holes. I get that, so I don't criticize any of that whatsoever. But I do think it warrants a further discussion before agreeing to that dollar figure in there. I think we need to have a lot more information. I think that'll be a healthy discussion.
Yeah,
I would agree with that completely.
Part of the visioning, we gave you like the scope of services that we'd anticipate over a period of time. We could have something like that generated.
Yeah. And I know that the chairman has sort of suggested that we stick to the topic, but I do feel I need to respond to the comment about clean water only benefiting certain portions of the community. I think clean water for our beaches, for our drinking water, all across the board is a benefit for the community as a whole. I don't have an issue at all with spending general tax dollars to help support that goal. We've been doing that for years. It's already a practice that's in place. So I don't have any issues with it whatsoever. And I do believe we do as a board need to sort of go through some of these philosophical issues at some point, but obviously tonight's not the place for it. So that's pretty much it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else, Tracy?
No, thank you.
Norm? No. Okay. I don't have any questions. Thank you very much.
The final items that you have here are just updated pages of the detailed budget book, if you're inclined to replace them in your original budget book. Thank you.
Okay, the next matter.
Maybe, I don't know if this is the time. I was going to bring it up under individual items, but speaking to the budget, I can update the board a little bit with the school budget from last night. because it's going to impact our budget in a positive way. They did not take a vote last night, but I had the presentation that was given to me at the school committee copied for everybody. So they're looking to make some reductions and use some E&D. Right, if they do that, they didn't have all the members there last night. They're looking at reducing it to 64,830 for 171. Having said that, if that does happen, that brings Dennis's increase over the 2.5% to 1.172 million, and ours would be actually a reduction. We would owe less than the 2.5%, so we would be getting a credit back of what we've budgeted for in the amount of 228,000. Some of this had to do with the foundation changes from the state level, and obviously a significant amount of it had to do with the new regional agreement. So they mentioned last night that there was some discussion with Dennis early on in their budget process about what the regional agreement shift might be to them, and they were looking at and perhaps planning for an increase in the vicinity of about 900,000. So this budget still exceeds that. So I think they're looking to get their budget down to somewhere around that number, which would mean even more of an increase to us. More of a decrease to us. So I think that that's important in terms of our budget discussion and planning. So it will change. Obviously, the vote hasn't been taken yet, but they're looking to get a reduction even more. And we all know from being on the other side of it that to get to that number, they have to reduce even more than that number to get there because of our share. So, you know, seeing that number makes me feel bad for Dennis because we've been there for so many years. And so anything that, you know, transpires, I'll let the board know, but the presentation is here from last night, and they're still working to get the budget down.
Thank you. Cape Cod Energy Park.
I've asked Jeff and Ed to address you on, it's been a while since you've had an update on the energy park. There's some timely developments that we'd like to brief the board on and get your sentiment as to the path forward, and they'll be here to address that.
For the prior discussion about free cash, I think some of you may remember that we funded capital from free cash only because we never had it within the levy, and our budgeting process 5-6 years ago allowed that to happen. So, you know, this adding a little bit more free cash to that budgeting process is something that was done in the past. And, you know, sometimes we never funded capital because we didn't have any free cash. So.
All right, thank you. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director again, and Ed Centio, Finance Director, here to cover this topic of Cape Cod Energy Park. I think Rich Bienvenu might chime in for the last couple of slides as well on things that he's working on. You've seen this before. This is essentially an update. When I was here to present the DPW budget to you, there were some questions that came up as it related to septage and the challenges associated with biosolids, and this is a continuation of that and a little more information, a little more detail for you on those issues. So just a site orientation for the public or those that might not have been to this site recently. This is the general site over at 50 Workshop Road. In the center of the picture here is the septage facility. That's, as we talked about during the budget presentation, seen a significant increase in flow in recent years and is keeping up with that process. In the commercial transfer station down right adjacent to the rail line here, that is a lease by Covanta dealing with a commercial MSW that comes into the facility. And this is the compost building, largely underutilized at this point. And this right here is a 10.5 million gallon water effluent storage tank for the clean water as it's treated before it's sent to its disposal location, either at the golf course or over at Buck Island Road at the spray irrigation. On top of it, this is a good picture because you can see the solar panels that are on top of that particular structure today. And then just to finish this orientation, the disposal area is just down to the south here on the other side of the rail tracks. So the bottom line from this picture is that's a very convenient location. As you can see, it's right off of Exit 8. So this is the agenda, what we're going to cover tonight, why this project started. We're going to talk a little bit about anaerobic digester and solar and battery technology as well. So just a little history. Back not too many years ago in FY17, there was new debt coming online from some facility improvements that were done. I believe it was about $2.5 million worth of facility improvements that hadn't seen significant improvements at the septic facility since it came online in 1992. And so there was a need to invest back in that facility. And so in FY17, $392,000 of new debt needed to be accommodated in the budget. So the Yarmouth team, with Ed Centio and Sean McGinnis was here at that time, and I was just coming on board shortly thereafter, looked at re-engineering the aspects of the facilities, particularly as it related to revenue, streamlining what the cost per gallon for septage and grease were, looking at the expenses associated with the operation going to a labor-only contract. This is a contract operations over at the septic facility, but going to a labor-only helped save some costs and made it more transparent as to what the expenses were associated with the facility. And also that approach to facility improvements, rather than taking another $2.5 million debt on in 5 or 10 years when the facility needed some upgrades. We look to do those facility improvements within the operating budget on a regular basis, so we're not to incur a large debt in the future for this facility. But with that said, there was some unresolved issues. We talked a little bit about it last time, and that relates to the biosolids disposal. So that cost has now become more of a critical issue. And in FY21, we're looking at over $500,000. That budget that I presented to you a couple of weeks ago has over $500,000 worth of biosolids disposal, and that's gone up almost 3%, or 3 times, sorry, almost 3 times in the last few years. So that's a significant issue, a major issue that we want to talk about. And with that said, I'll hand it off to Ed to cover a little bit more detail about the costs and this particular project.
Thanks. One of the items that we actually tackled with the team and Cape Light Compact was the energy utilization at the facility. They funded all of the energy improvements at the facility, and we saved quite a bit from an energy standpoint. One of the reasons why we're here and why we've been working on this project is not only to reduce expenses at this facility and make it more financially viable, but also to generate non-tax revenue. So this is goal number 5 that the Selectmen have had for financial health of the organization. And this is part of the check-in that we want to have with you. Is this still a project that you still want us to pursue as it relates to not only solving our biosolids needs, but also to look to generate non-tax revenue for the variety of things that you all have been talking about today? Jeff described the debt service that we were confronted with at the time. The plant was operating at break even. It was not generating any cash flow to handle repairs. It was a large energy user. The plant capacity, looking at the revenue side, was increased from 21 million gallons to 28 million gallons, along with DEP and a few other folks. This was about a year before we even knew that Tri-Town was closing. We felt that in order to pay for the debt service, we had to be able to compete more effectively for the gallons that were out there, and subsequently they went out of business. As Jeff indicated, the contracts were changed. One of the things that Jeff brought to the table almost immediately upon his arrival. And the fact that when Tri-Town closed, we didn't get all of the waste from Tri-Town. A lot of the folks in anticipation of Tri-Town closing went from 3,000-gallon tankers to 9,000-gallon tankers because they were going to go off Cape. So we have quarterly meetings with certain customers. We do marketing to customers, and we've actually recently built up volume to a record level that we achieved last year. So it didn't just flow to us automatically. We had to go out and get it. We've described this before, what an anaerobic digester is. What we're basically doing is taking waste, either food waste or biosolids, utilizing a natural process to generate methane, and that methane can be used for a variety of beneficial uses, including injection into national grid's pipeline, or it could be used to power a generator that could be generate electricity, depending on where the market is at the time for the gas. Just a little bit of history very quickly. An RFP was issued. We have done this project with no Town of Yarmouth dollars. It's still speculative, so we didn't want to actually start taking taxpayer dollars to actually work on this particular project. A lot of overtime and other types of things from volunteers have helped to move this project forward. So we obtained grant funds to actually get outside assistance for an RFP. We chose a partner. The town meeting approved a 30-year lease for the facility. New Bedford actually has, they talked about putting in an anaerobic digester. That kind of froze the marketplace because we need long-term contracts in order to move forward with something like this. They have subsequently stopped their efforts in that regard. They're spending, or we're spending, a lot of engineering dollars to actually try to move this thing forward, something that we're not doing. We're doing that, kind of bootstrapping it. And New Bedford has dropped off, so now we have a clear field to move forward with this initiative. The approach is a public-private partnership. We're not looking to add any debt or risk to the town as much as we can avoid that. We are looking at a lot of borrowing going forward, so we want to keep that borrowing level as low as possible. And we're partnering with folks that are in the business of operating anaerobic digesters. This is another look at the site. So we're looking at, right now, sections B and C for the anaerobic digester. A may be used at some point in time, but this is all within the interior of the operation of the current regional waste management facilities that we have there. And I'm going to turn it over to Rich.
I just got a couple slides on this, just an update. Ed, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just bring up the map with the shows section E, I guess.
Probably after the questions.
At the end?
Oh, section A. Yeah, keep on going.
That one?
You might recall I had updated you, and you've actually executed some agreements to provide for a ground mount solar PV system, about a 1 megawatt system located in that area at section E. It's not really a separate parcel, but that abuts the state highway and goes down to where the off-ramp is. Down by the off-ramp, there's a bit of a hill there, so you can't really see over that hill. But perhaps to the left of that map, in order to install that, we have to go through a site plan review process, which is happening. We've run into a little bit of a snag with the decision on the site with the plant has some setback requirements through the Board of Health, and so we got to clarify what those requirements are and see how that might modify the project. But there is a potential that some of those trees would have to come down, and so we'd have to evaluate when we actually have an actual plan that's gone through the site plan review process, what that involves as far as tree clearing. Of course, being sensitive, and I think the point of the Board of Health decision at the time was to prevent some sort of visual buffer between the roadway and the industrial plant on the other side of the trees. And so we'll have to, that's still in the works. But we did want to update you as to where that stood with the plan review, but also the significance of it is part of our round 4 RFP with CVEC that we got this opportunity, and that 1 megawatt of power was anticipated to generate about $225,000 of potential savings, of which we took about half to dedicate towards our wastewater plan, funding plan. And of course, if that does in fact generate $225,000, we would then increase it accordingly. But we didn't want to use the full amount because that still remains to be seen depending on what ultimately gets developed at that location. It has to do a lot to do with the sizing that we might be able to put in there depending on the setbacks and the level of clearing that would occur or could occur. The other component of that is dovetailing that energy with a battery storage idea. And this also goes to the preparedness grant that we just got awarded, $150,000. It's for this site. It's also for our Station 3 site in West Yarmouth. Basically setting up solar, PV, and battery storage, and to make these locations as critical facilities independent of the grid and to be able to operate in the event of a large catastrophe or power outage. And so that's kind of all the things that we're working on associated with that. And we're also trying to evaluate, is there an opportunity since Station 3, and now this was all in the works prior to getting approval on our DPW facility, but now that that's been approved and construction has happened pretty quick, perhaps there's an opportunity to even coordinate some work between Station 3 and the DPW facility so that it's, in essence, creates its own little microgrid there in West Yarmouth.
Just to follow up on that, the engineering team that was assisted us in that application is a combination of Weston and Sampson and Rivermore Energy Services. They will present to the board in April, I believe, what's essentially the 75% design phase of engineering to let you know what the concepts are, where we're at. And that's a critical point because the project is eligible for up to $2 million of construction funding following right after that. So that would be in this fiscal year as well. So.
And the state doesn't give us the planning money to not give us the construction money if we've got a good plan. And so it kind of all fits together here.
That's great.
Questions?
If we can go back to the map slide that shows the rest of the parcels with the letters on them. Yeah.
That one did.
Yeah.
We need to start building.
Go ahead, Ed. If you want to talk about parcel A.
I want to talk
sure.
about putting a shovel in the ground.
Yeah. What we've also done is we have a draft RFP for the rest of the property. And again, with your permission and backing, what we would do is we would release that RFP and we could see what types of opportunities we could get for parcels C, A, and B. There are some folks that are interested in this parcel for existing businesses as well as potential new businesses. That might be a combination of a commercial endeavor or a commercial solar endeavor that would be related to these parcels. So, we're in a position now to release that RFP to move forward on those properties as well. Again, looking at the theme of we want to start bringing in non-tax revenue to try to meet some of the challenges that we have as a community, that many of which you've heard today.
So will the parcels be, the RFP be in the energy park domain, or?
So the whole concept of originally when we came up with the energy park concept was to have, we called it Energy Park because we were looking at anaerobic digestion, solar, and battery technology. We had partners like CVEC and Cape Lake Compact and Barnstable County and Cape Cod Commission, as well as DEP and others that were looking at this site. And all of those were the pieces that we thought might be appropriate for this site. That's why we named it Cape Cod Energy Park instead of, the anaerobic digester project. So,
So I guess maybe I'm a little confused.
Well, so parcel A, B, and C, presently stand kind of orphaned outside of what our solar, battery, and anaerobic digester footprint is.
Okay, all right.
But we do believe you could do more energy projects there, or you could have another commercial or economic development project that could either bring in jobs, or also, if it didn't bring in jobs, it could also generally bring in revenue.
Is that how the RFP is crafted? Is it to create some type of reinvestment, or is it reinvestment specific to energy?
We've been broad. What we've said is that you could do something related to energy. You could do something that's related to a commercial type endeavor. Or what you can do is you can do something that's both energy and commercial. So if, for example, there might have been a parking lot expansion, you could put canopied solar on that parking lot expansion, and we could see, well, you're leasing this particular property, you're utilizing the parking, but you're also generating energy. Can we benefit, the town benefit from both of those projects, as opposed to just benefiting from one or the other? So it's still, part of that theme, but somebody might just say, we want to lease that property, we really don't want to do anything with energy. You may look at the responses to that and say, that's fine, that fits within what we need to do in terms of wastewater or clean water. It fits what we need to do for the school funding and some of the other projects that we want to go forward with, and it fits the makeup of the area that we have with low impact, or the impact that you think is acceptable, and then we may pick somebody that fulfills those needs.
Do we know what zoning district this resides in? Is this the APD as well?
It is the APD, but what we've done is we've done some things looking at some credit swaps. So we also have some, say, foreclosed property in the APD, and what somebody could do is actually buy that foreclosed property, say they'll never do anything with it, and then we can have a nitrogen credit swap in order to help facilitate something being in this area.
So what's the size of, I'm losing an idea of the scale here. I'm looking at the transfer station and dump area, and so this is 1.5 times the size of that, it looks like. So, we're talking a very large area.
Approximately 16 acres, not counting E. So we're looking at D, A, B, C, and D, potentially.
A, B, C, and D. Those are 16 acres?
That's 16 acres in total.
Okay. So now the areas for the anaerobic and digester, which are in the light green there, are they, is that covered? Is that going to be buildings, or is that?
Do you want to go back?
Yeah, right there. So this is a conceptual drawing of this facility. So where you see the tanks, that would be where the anaerobic digester would be, as well as more fully utilizing the compost building across the way. Where you see the dotted lines, that portion of that building is not being used at all. So where you see unused compost facility, dotted lines on the left, dotted lines on the right, that entire section of the building is not being used at all.
Oh, really?
It hasn't been used in 30 years. To the right of that is a biofilter, and what we would do is we would have that biofilter serve the anaerobic digester, the regional septic facility, the regional transfer station, and the anaerobic digester.
So what is the amount of income, net income, that would be generated from the anaerobic digester facility?
So let me just give you an idea of where we are with the project phase right now.
Mm-hmm.
What we've done is we've drafted an IMA. That IMA needs to go through the attorneys. It's gone through our attorneys. It needs to go through the attorneys of our partner. And then intermunicipal agreement. And then what we would do, and we've already had a discussion with a couple of communities who were kind of waiting on New Bedford, and now they're like, let's go. Once we get the size of the facility, because we're looking at both revenue sharing as well as lease revenue, we would be able to estimate that portion. We have some lease information, a lease appraisal for the rest of the property. So it could be, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rich just talked about a small, pretty undesirable section of this property, potentially yielding $250,000. So, if this all works out, we could be talking about some considerable money.
Well, I also think that what shouldn't be missed on that is the digester gives us an option for an ever-escalating cost on the biosolid situation, and with the PFAS problem in the waste product now, that's really problematic to get rid of. So all things being equal, if you can control and lower that actual cost, that will pay great dividends for eons.
Right.
So,
and that's why we got into the game. But I think, as Jeff described both today and earlier, it's hit us a lot faster than we thought it would.
Now, there's a transportation side of this. I mean, you have to get the solids in there from, what's the collection system?
For the biosolids?
For biosolids and the transportation system.
Yeah, it would either be train or truck. So this is, that's still a working railroad going right to this facility. So it'd either be train or truck coming into this facility.
So the train could be coming from where?
Southeast Massachusetts.
Or, I mean, how far out on the Cape does it go?
It goes over the bridge. It stops here.
Stops here. So
doesn't go any
it's not
further.
going to be serving other parts of the Cape.
It would be trucked in from other parts of the Cape. They're already driving by us with their material.
Provincetown, Chatham, Barnstable, Falmouth, they're all trucking their biosolids off Cape currently.
Oh, really?
By
Figure out
truck,
a way to
yeah.
use the bike path more.
Yeah. Put it on bike saddle packs.
Well, I mean, there's, I guess I'm thinking about Exit 8 and the transportation issues. And I think, certainly, Jeff, you're familiar with what's going on with the MPO and the planning with regard to Exit 8 and the transportation issues there, the potential stoplights and so forth, the traffic control because of safety problems. And that would be additional issues that would be
That's an issue.
introduced.
One individual, this is all pie in the sky until it happens, talked about doing some work on that exit if a commercial enterprise went in there.
Okay.
Actually assisting with some of those issues.
yeah, so as a for instance, if we had a project, say, that responded to the RFP and it had maybe, 65 to 100 full-time equivalent jobs, there's a MassWorks grant program that is available, and that typically is used and can give up to $2 or $3 or $4 million for infrastructure improvements. And usually MDOT will work with a grant applicant to work in the improvements that solve the issues associated with landing a development project there.
Okay.
So there's a lot of hurdles to get over, and I'm not necessarily saying that's the best thing for the town. I'm just saying that there are avenues, and before we even get to that point, we'd share that with the board for decision.
Okay.
Yeah, and so some of the traffic would be at night as opposed to during the day. And again, these trucks, if they're coming from Provincetown, coming from Chatham, they're driving on this highway, kind of going the other way and coming, back this way. So I don't know that the traffic, it's going to actually reduce traffic going over the bridge. Those types of things are going to be helpful.
I mean, we have some unknowns with regard to that area as well, with the addition of the school. The new school at Station Avenue, and potential impacts of traffic coming in. Same exit. I mean, it's, so.
And again, the reason why we're here is if you all think that there are some insurmountable issues as it relates to doing something here, the fact that maybe we're cutting down some trees, maybe there's traffic that you feel is, we don't want to impact anymore, do you want us to keep on going with this? Do you want to continue to pursue something like this, or do you want to say, well, that's not something we want to do in our, in this particular location? We're looking for that feedback.
I'll give you my feedback. I think we need to continue with the creative effort that's, to try to develop the potential and understand what the potential is. And naturally, we've got to take into consideration any significant impact on traffic and so forth and work with the state on that. But I think that it's, hate to say stop. I think we should proceed forward.
And one of the things we've done is we've reached out to a lot of partners, including the COD Commission, and we've talked about traffic issues.
Can I finish asking my questions, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Dan mentioned PFAS. Is the anaerobic digester an adequate end for PFAS in terms of what DEP allows?
So what we've done is, again, working with a partner that's actually been in this business. So it's not me speculating. It's a partner that's having to deal with this in other communities, in Maine and other locations, and they have to address this. They have, technology and techniques that they would put in place to actually deal with those types of issues. We're also looking at two different scales. Again, we have a critical need right now. We're looking at something, and if you look at this picture, there's an indication of a micro AD. There's a potential for actually putting in a Yarmouth scale project to deal with our immediate needs and issues. And if we had a Yarmouth scale project, we would do what we're doing today, which is we would extract all of the materials related to this processing, and it would go off Cape to an incinerator. So we're not looking at PFAS in that case impacting us at all. The other piece of the PFAS would be if we actually did treatment and say we pushed it over to Buck Island, then we need to treat the PFAS, and they are aware of that, and we've been shut out of places to actually dispose of because of the PFAS issue. So that's top of mind. That has to be solved, or we can't go forward with this project. We can't dispose of any effluent if there are any PFAS issues. I live here. I don't want to have that. I don't want to have to deal with that.
Is there any type of, and I guess I don't know exactly how an anaerobic digester works, but is there any type of emissions that come from that type of thing that should be of concern?
So what an anaerobic digester does is it captures the methane. So if you were to land apply this material, which happens, if you were to compost the food waste, if you were to put it into a landfill, the methane is not captured. So this actually captures the methane and utilizes the methane as opposed to having it releasing it into the environment.
So so environmentally, and what about it being in the aquifer protection in terms of making sure it doesn't?
It's lighter than air, so it's not going to go into the water supply.
Okay. And there needs to be safeguards that are engineered into this facility as well, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I think we can't afford not to do it. There's just so many issues facing us now in terms of the cost of taking it elsewhere and finding places to take it elsewhere, that I think we have to continue to look at this. And I think that, kudos to your continuous out-of-the-box thinking in terms of revenue and solving problems. At some point in time, perhaps we could manage a lot of these things, between the battery and the energy, we could be self-efficient, which is, I think, always a nice goal. Now, if we could just get some food and some farms, that would be even better. And we could do it all on our own.
Well, we'll have fertilizer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I, too, would like to applaud all your efforts. It's very creative, it's visionary, and it's actually very, very exciting. And I think your approach is very, very sound as well, taking it step by step and being very clear about making decisions that may come back to haunt us. So I think your approach has been right on, spot on, and this has the potential to be a very significant project and development, not just for the town of Yarmouth, but for Cape Cod. But as so I'm mindful of some of the caution flags that you've put up for us. I'm often in the presence of people who have developments and projects, and they tend to gloss over the potential pitfalls. And I applaud you for identifying and flagging some of the things that we need to be mindful of as we go forward. I think that's very prudent. So with that in mind, again, I'm still very enthusiastic and very supportive, but I just want to sort of flag a few things that we need to be cognizant of. One is the traffic on Station Ave. It's an issue. I just want to make sure that going forward, as we think about the development on that corridor, because the traffic over the past couple of years has gotten significantly worse. And we also have other developers looking at doing some other things on that roadway that could create a traffic problem. And then we've got this new school. And I hear from people a lot about what kind of traffic we're going to see and some issues on Station Ave. I mean, when you come out of Long Pond Drive in the morning, taking a left to go north on Station Ave, you can't get that far. I mean, the traffic backs up significantly there. So I think to the extent that we're doing anything on any of those parcels that creates or allows for significant volume of traffic, I think that's something that will raise red flags with residents in the community as well as with other folks, and particularly a lot of people that live on Station Ave. So we need to be, I think, looking at whatever traffic studies, and it's good that you're talking to the commission. I'm with Eric, the more we can get them to do stuff for us, the better. Maybe they should be helping us do some more traffic projections and traffic analysis so that we can sort of look ahead. Maybe we can speculate on some of the developments that are envisioned, and including the school, and get a better handle on those potential traffic issues going forward. The other thing I want to flag is the footprint on the solar. I think I would not want to give green light to a solar farm out in that area, given its close proximity to the highway, without the board having a chance to review, at least conceptually, what might look like, what loss of buffer there would be, and to also give residents, taxpayers, people in town who are also concerned about that area an opportunity to see what we're looking at. And I think there might be some value in getting some public input on that within the community. As the third point is just a clarification in terms of any discharge. Is anything going to be discharged on the site at all into the ground?
Not on this site. We're currently disposing of anything that's on this site, either at the Buck Island disposal area where it's been permitted for effluent disposal, and also on the golf course. Okay,
so in this area there won't be any groundwater discharges at all? That's great. I would assume the methane improvement becomes a significant benefit. I mean, I know we're going to be hearing from people at some point about, I read in the paper about climate change and what things the towns can do. This would be certainly on the climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. This would be certainly a major step forward in terms of doing something that might be helpful there.
And renewable energy as opposed to fossil fuels.
So that's pretty much it. I think those are the sort of the caution flags that I put up. But I trust you folks to keep them in mind as we sort of take the next few steps.
And if, again, like you said, and I think we're all in that ballgame. We want to kind of, sound the cautionary flag. If people have some issues with this particular type of project, we've got people that want our research and want this process and
I agree.
Come up with locations, and all the New Bedford wanted all of our materials. So, I mean, other people are looking to kind of take a project like this. So if there are, people that are, worried about, the traffic and that's going to be an issue, or worried about, removing some trees potentially. We cut down 9,000 trees at the 3,000 trees at the golf course. I mean, sometimes you do that for economic development. I think one of the slides is, the government owns about 30% of the land mass in Yarmouth, and I think what we can do is we can, continue to preserve properties and say any acreage that we use here, we can actually, put other acreage so that won't be used. So there are a lot of ways to kind of mitigate maybe the overall fears of that. And when I look at this, if somebody were to look at solar panels, coming off of Route 6, and they said, well, there's a Cape Cod Energy Park there, and the town of Yarmouth is actually spearheading battery technology and an anaerobic digester. I mean, doesn't that give Yarmouth a different view in maybe somebody's eyes as it relates to the type of technology that we
I hear
use?
what you're saying. I think what is a matter of transparency and openness and public
absolutely.
involvement. We owe it to the people of this community to have a full sense of what it is they're getting to. I'm sure there are ways to mitigate any potential visual impacts, but so those would need to be identified and potentially built into the project, so that becomes potentially a project cost. But to sort of fluff it off.
No, that's why we're here.
Right, that's the point that I'm making.
that's why
I
we're
think
here.
what we need to do is anticipate what those issues are and have answers.
Right.
So when you're asked the question, what does this mean, in terms of traffic, we have answers.
That's
on
why,
it.
yeah.
Right, and it may mean that we have to get some additional studies and investigations done by some folks that have, an
So what-
army of traffic engineers
So
and
what we're-
traffic counters.
So when we have a project plan, so a part of our project plan is that what we need to do is actually determine how much feedstock we'll secure, because that's going to drive, how much traffic there would be. And then it will drive, and then we would look at what time of day is that traffic going to actually hit this particular facility, because that's controllable as well. So, we're
But I
going.
also make those points not just with respect to this. This is actually, from a traffic point of view, in my view, a low-traffic
Yes, it is.
generator.
Right.
What I'm concerned about are the other parcels. I like the idea of the other parcels being utilized with a consistent theme of an energy park, in finding ways, even if it's a potential mixed use, looking at projects that in some way are compatible and consistent with the thinking of this vision. Because I think from an economic development point of view, that makes a great deal of sense, too.
I don't want to usurp what Dan might say in terms of what the board's.
No, I think it's fair to say that from people that we've spoke to in different economic opportunity development spheres, there is likely to be some very good choices for the board to ponder, some of which could have traffic impacts, some of which would not, but either way, likely revenue source for the town. And I think you'll have an opportunity as a board to evaluate what path to go. Sometimes job generation, we talk a lot about that in economic development, but sometimes if you can get a pretty good trade-off that doesn't cause a lot of other of these impacts that you discussed, and you can still get revenue from another economic opportunity that doesn't have that same footprint problem, that's just as good for the community sometimes. So we're hopeful that it will generate, based on the preliminary discussions we've had over the last couple of years, some options for us to consider for you.
And I think the bottom line is, do we go ahead, issue an RFP, and see what some of our options are, some of our choices?
My vote is yes.
Hang on, I have a question. To completely blow up the parking question, the traffic question, when you said, I think you had mentioned a parking lot with a solar canopy over it, I immediately thought of a park and ride stop similar to what's at exit 10. We can't do that?
Oh, we could.
So why did you shake your head no?
No, I guess, I mentioned parking with a canopy. It wasn't that, but yes, we could do the other option, yes.
What other option?
That you mentioned, yes.
I mean, I don't know what the demand is. I mean, this is an ideal location, right off the highway, big lot, big parking lot, big turnaround. I don't know if there is a host community agreement. If Yarmouth were to host a facility like that, who pays for it? What is the advantage to the town? But Harwich put that one in not 10 years ago. Must have been something in it for them. But again, that's an ideal location. And I don't know if you had one at exit 10, exit 8, and exit 6, if that would be too many.
Yeah, I think
state-owned?
I think the Harwich one was state-owned, was kind of in that interchange, if you will.
Yeah.
There are other opportunities within, north of this site, of state-owned properties that could potentially be looked at for that, on the other side of Station Ave.
So this property wouldn't be well-suited for something like that?
If you had a
Maybe.
redesign of the intersection due to traffic mitigation, it might present an opportunity for something like that.
I'm not sure I would rule that out, Eric.
We
I
could-
think your suggestion is a great idea.
We
I
could
think it's worth-
advertise it to the DOT as well, the RFP.
At least have
It'd be
someone.
worth asking if they'd
Yeah.
be interested in it. I mean, I know you can't get a parking spot at exit 6. I don't know what
it's
exit 10
brutal.
is like.
P&B doesn't pick up at exit 10, though, right? They do
They don't.
Hyannis, Barnstable. Down Cape, Provincetown, and then they do Bourne. And,
So what are
and
those people parking there for?
I don't know, probably to carpool with somebody, perhaps?
I think there's a park and ride sign right on that lot.
But who picks up there? I looked at P&B schedules, I never saw an exit 10 P&B pickup,
could add it.
so. You
Potential they could add it.
There is a Peter Pan route that goes out to the Outer Cape as well, so I don't know.
Maybe.
Just a thought, I mean, when a parking lot with a solar canopy over it, I mean, that was the first thing I thought of.
I think it's a great idea to look at as well.
So we want all comers. Who's going to give us the best deal?
I mean, if you're trying to reduce fossil fuel in an energy park, carpooling is one suggestion.
Doesn't that fit within the theme? And it's a public purpose, it's a
But
public benefit?
I'm not sure if you're going
Public
to generate any
transportation.
revenue from that.
So I think the feeling of the board,
Canopy, solar
I think the
canopy.
feeling of the board is that you go forward with the IRFP, see what the level of interest is. Mark, you agree?
I would agree with that, but I think when we get to a point where we're looking at an RFP, I want to know exactly what the answer is to Eric's proposal, and I want it fairly well vetted so that there's been some real solid discussion with Mass DOT and others about the potential viability of that activity at that site.
And I think Norm's agreed that you go forward, Tracy.
Absolutely.
Eric. So it's unanimous feeling of the board. And I won't repeat all the comments that my colleagues have pointed out, but I'm pretty much in agreement with them. And I want to thank you for your creative thinking on this. And I think it's a project that involves a good degree of imagination, but I think you're facing a lot of very unique challenges here. And fortunately, we have the people that have that flexibility and mental dexterity to think of very creative solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the Lynx course should be
Okay,
next game.
board and committee actions. Mark, committee appointments.
Okay, I have two items under this category. Every year, we appoint a member to the Cape Light Compact and an alternate. In the past, we've had Joyce Flynn as the town's representative, with Dan Knappich, our town administrator, as the alternate. So I'm recommending that the board reappoint both of these individuals to their respective positions for 1 year, running through December 2020.
I'll move those appointments.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. That motion carries. And the next item deals with the Energy Committee. These are also rituals in January where, in this case, I'm asking you to reappoint Joyce Flynn and Steve Gavin as regular members to the Energy Committee for 3-year terms running through December 2022.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. The next item is approval of minutes of October 8th, 2019.
Second.
A motion is second. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? So that carries unanimously and brings us to upcoming agenda review. So we're moving the, I think this date's wrong, isn't it? March 19th, no meeting. Isn't it supposed to be 17th?
17th, no meeting.
So the 17th meeting was advanced to the 16th.
That's correct.
And
What day is that, Monday?
It's a Monday.
it's a Monday, and then, so we're going to skip the next day, the Tuesday meeting. We also have a meeting on the 27th, which is our next meeting, the Tri-Town meeting at Station Ave Elementary. There's no time in there, but that's 6, isn't it?
At 6 o'clock, yeah, we'll have, we'll release the agendas.
The agenda.
Posted today.
The agenda was posted, and trying to collect some various materials, so we'll try to get that out tomorrow in advance of the meeting.
So 6 o'clock at Station Ave cafeteria.
So on March 10th, we have an alcohol license and weekly and Sunday entertainment application.
March 10th? Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking back. Okay.
And then we have community development budget review, CPC article review, shellfish lease reallocation, FY21 Finance Department budget review.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for maybe 15 minutes to discuss an item that came up last week at our DPW Building Committee meeting.
Okay.
Should not be an involved conversation, but I will send an email describing in detail what the conversation would entail.
Okay.
But the gist of it is we have the opportunity to upgrade a piece of equipment to service vehicles that we do not own yet but could own in the future, and certainly some larger vehicles that are not DBW vehicles, but obviously that comes at a cost. The building committee has approved the change order to cover the cost. That will, as it stands right now, that will come out of our contingency, but I just wanted to make the board aware of it and see if perhaps there were an alternate funding source, if there were a way to make up for it, if for some reason at the end we...
So you want to do that on the 10th?
Yeah, I don't think it will take very long. But if I could have 15 minutes for that on the 10th.
Okay. So what shall we entitle that? Just
DPW equipment upgrade.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
What's the expectation of Tuesday? I'm sorry, this Thursdays. Are we going to be taking a position?
No, so there's no position. What we're looking to do is have the three boards have an opportunity, if there is any outstanding issues on the agreement, to have an opportunity to discuss that or dialogue it face-to-face. That is one big particular item. The other one is to hear directly from the SRF staff as it relates to the regional opportunity for a 0% in principal forgiveness. So they'll be there in attendance as well. And then any the third part of it that is critically important is the review of the third-party analysis of the CDM cost projections.
And have we received that report yet?
It will be sent to you by tomorrow.
Yeah, we received a draft essentially Monday. Some work on the agreement piece a few days, end of last week. The cost piece on just Monday. We had a meeting of the DHY working group on Monday to review that. And the consensus was that it's going to remain a draft, these reports, for Thursday's presentation by Weston and Sampson. And part of that discussion was to be that the proposal was that the engineers of each of the three town engineers in each of the three towns would get together with CDM and Weston and Sampson to resolve any of the issues that might be raised in some of the. So they're long reports. It's about 10 pages on each of those comments, and so the bottom line is there's no glaring issues. But there's specific issues that, best resolved by getting everybody in the room at the same time and determining what the factually correct way to say it is.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say there's some professional disagreement amongst the engineering teams as it relates to a few items. But the good news was that the
cost.
Well, I would say different aspects of how to go about laying out the project that could have a cost impact. But the good news is, in general, nothing is going to move the needle to, a large magnitude of inaccurate costs, if you will. These would be, in some particular cases, sizing of pipe in some locations, different methods to do an analysis on the cost of, say, Bass River recharge. So I think it was discussed amongst the subgroup that both of the engineering teams from CDM and Weston and Sampson should, on those items they diverge on, should have an opportunity to hash it out and see what the outcome is from that. So, but from our perspective as a group, as a subgroup, and I know Selectman Forrest was there, the good news there was that there was nothing that, if we were looking for confidence in the idea that the project was X sum of dollars, I believe we all walked away from that believing that it was a very confident peer review as it relates to what CDM has put together. There's just a few discrepancies that have to be addressed, that's all.
And in terms of us at this Tri-Town, have we collectively come up with issues that we want, or a position on golf or any of the other items that might be outstanding?
So everything that's been discussed here by this board, either at a board meeting or in individuals, have been brought to the subgroup for discussion. And I think if there's still something on someone's mind, Thursday night's the opportunity to bring it up. But I do believe that the sentiment from the other towns is that we are probably within 99% in agreement on the agreement language. And like I said, there may be an opportunity to talk about a few things here or there, and the boards haven't had that opportunity to face each other on this topic. But I don't, you know, and again, Selectman Forrest, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see anything that you haven't aired that they haven't heard of and had.
Understood, but I'm talking about speaking as one voice. Has our board come up with what our request might be relating to what we might ask another board, instead of us all individually asking what we might want? I think if we had a decision from us in terms of what our ask might be, it would be helpful.
Well, to try to respond a little bit to that, Tracy, I've made sure that every time there's been an issue that we have discussed, that the other members, between myself and Dan and the other participants, we've raised them. And to the extent that they're board issues, I've always felt that it's important that they hear from me on the concerns and issues that the board has raised. The last time I presented something to the group was over the question of golf, and we were concerned a bit that there might be some hesitation in terms of making the town whole, in terms of the costs.
I understand, but we have not come to a point where we know what that might look like, correct? So the last time we talked about it, there was some question about what's the baseline. Maybe we're not at that point yet.
I think what we've been trying to do is identify issues that board members have been raising, and then making sure that we can get some...
More at a conceptual level.
Right. Right. We've sort of been at that point to flag. That's why I've been that's why, you know...
when we vote at town meeting to go into this agreement, I think we have to have some confidence that those issues have been addressed more than just conceptually.
No, I would agree. We have to identify when we want to put it on our agenda so that we can have more of a discussion. But I think the meeting on Thursday will be a chance for making sure that there's nothing left as an issue at this point with respect to the agreement.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that probably the top three items that stand out in my mind as things that we've had the most recent discussion on over the last 6 months includes the cost of rebuilding Bass River, commission makeup and percentage of flow, and how you calculate a percentage of flow, and how the commission makeup's not necessarily dependent upon that. And then the last part about that was the entire conversation about how the budgeting sequence from the commission would go as it relates to presenting it to the boards, and what the language should be in the agreement associated with that. And I think, you know, what everybody understands is that the final dollar value associated with what a Bass River rebuild actually is still being refined to some degree. But there's acceptance by the other towns that clearly we're in this together, in that whatever that dollar value ends up being, we'll work through this as a solution, because I think the consensus, at least amongst the working group participants, have been that there's no question that doing this together makes more sense than going it alone. So we're all in it together, because we're all going to be in the same boat on this topic, because Dennis hosts the plant, they have a recharge area, they have an impacted golf area down the line. We just got to work out some of that detail. But to Eric's point, conceptually, I think we're really close. We're good.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be more than, my point is, I think that those details need to be more than conceptual before we go to town meeting.
I agree. I think by focusing on the cost of rebuilding Bass River, we're missing what 800 people will be most concerned about with regard to Bass River, and that is, where the hell am I going to play golf when the course is shut down for 2 years? And is it going to be shut down for 2 years, or going to be shut down for 3 years?
We're hoping just one.
Well, I don't know. There's, people out there are hearing 2, and they're thinking,
yeah.
well, if they're saying 2, it's probably going to be 3.
Those issues are more in our control. We have to make a decision as a board. You'd have to decide, do you want to do the rebuild over the course of 1 year, just bring it dark, and then make an accommodation? And what the working group said, that they would each commission their golf directors to work out a suitable strategy such that the members in Yarmouth will have a place to play, whether it's dedicating time over at the links or having some preferred time over with the other towns. Everybody agreed, though we don't have a plan right now for that, the golf directors will make sure that it'll all be accommodated, including staff, because obviously there's staff impacts to us. And each of the communities had indicated that those employees would be certainly welcome at those other facilities on a mutual aid situation. So I think there's a fair amount of detail that will have to be given some time to work out. It's not, going to be something we can solve easily overnight, but certainly we're going to have some time from the time that if the town meeting vote is successful to the time in which a shovel hits the ground, like 2 years, to work on those details.
What if we lose half our members? I'm throwing it out there because it's a possibility.
I think if you want to start speculating on doomsday scenarios,
No, it's not a
golf is not the place I would start,
I don't think
personally.
that's a doomsday scenario.
I think
it's a critical reality to the future of the courses and to an asset of the town. And you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. But, if 500 members disappear and take their $1,000 a year with them, that's a $500,000 impact. And how long is it going to take us to recover that? It's got to be thrashed out somehow.
I'd just like to see something in writing, if we could come to some type of...
What specifically do you want in writing?
Well, just the acknowledgement that loss of revenue or the use of that property is part of the project as a whole, and that the details, however it is, just so that there's an acknowledgement that is part of the program, and that's split by, why, am I off topic?
No, I'm just trying to understand what your comment is.
No, I understand what you're
There's
saying.
nothing in there related to the golf course in the agreement. And we all know it's part of the project and the project costs. And I just want to make sure that we dot our i's and cross our t's. And they're not going to have a problem with it because, as Dan said, we're going to be in the same boat. But do we want to pay for, down the road? I want to make sure that it's fair on both ends, that we're both using the same basis for our analysis in terms of lost revenue. How it's going to be, it doesn't need to be within it, but it needs to be acknowledged. We don't need to have every detail worked out now, but I would feel more comfortable going forward if we acknowledge that this is part of the project.
If I may, Dan and Mark, you were at the meeting on the 14th, I believe. We had a discussion about there's many different ways to approach having an arrangement with the town to use land, whether it's a lease, a license, or an easement, or any number of ways. So we talked about developing that as part of our transition document that would allow for any one of those methods. We didn't have to say, for example, a lease, because it might not be a lease. We might want to do it differently. An IMA, who knows? But perhaps in that language might be some of the verbiage that would provide the confidence to this board to say, which shall, such will compensate for X, Y, and Z, including lost revenues or profits, or however you want to word it. But maybe that's the spot we could do it.
I think that would make some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that needs to be factored in, we don't even have you don't have a commission set yet, so there's no decision makers for a DHY entity yet to mull this over, but we could have a conceptual document that forms the framework such that it's like almost like an exhibit that we can agree to as part of the agreement going forward at town meeting, such that, so when the commission does sit, they have some general frameworks that should be appreciated by them.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. I think that being able to identify what is generally understood as the project costs or the project components, I don't believe that is part of the overall document as it's currently constructed, is it?
It's not.
Then I think, just to make some clarity, it would either an appendix to the agreement, something that identifies the key components of what the project is.
That's a worthy discussion for Thursday night, for
But
sure.
then you have another question, that's how to determine the losses. Because when you're just worrying about Bass River, that's one thing, but when you're looking at other golf courses, they run them on a different basis than we do.
Well,
We run ours on an enterprise basis. Dennis, I think, runs it out of the general fund, don't they? So you got to make sure, as Tracy says, that you're using some kind of consistent methodology, because it may come back the other way too. So you want to make sure it's fair on both sides.
Yeah, but I can see an appendix being
translation.
associated with this document that clearly articulates what the project components are and how we might anticipate the costs. I think that's not an unusual or inappropriate
I would imagine the
recommendation.
commissioners, if an entity was formed and there was a board of commissioners, whatever the form of agreement is, whether a lease, a license, easement, or otherwise, it's a negotiation. So if you had document the appropriate framework for that negotiation to include business losses or profits or revenues, however you would phrase it, that's their guidelines. I think every circumstance, every negotiation might be a little bit different depending on the circumstances, right?
Right.
So
The other thing is the town of Yarmouth has all the leverage in terms of the utilization of that facility. The board is going to have to approve any development of that site for a recharge. So you'll have a DYH Board of Commissioners or Board of Partners. It'll be their job ultimately to
get your
come to Yarmouth for an approval on the use of it.
Correct.
Because this is a discharge site. Now, if we were going alone, Bass River Golf Course and the Buck Island site, those would be exclusively used by us, or in most degrees. So we would be responsible for all of those costs.
have your
and
own
all those.
negotiation with yourselves.
Right, but on the other hand, this is a chance to cost share on those impacts, on those losses. And the reality is that nothing happens unless this board approves it. Am I missing something? Is that
Right,
correct?
no, and I guess that's the point I was trying to make. There would need to be an agreement in one form or fashion.
Right.
And that agreement would have to be negotiated by
Right.
the DHY commissioners
Right.
with each board of selectmen for the facilities or properties listed in the agreement.
There you go. So the town of Yarmouth is going to be in a
So you're not,
position.
there's still a stopgap
Because
along the way.
you can't build a treatment plant without a discharge site. I guess you can, but you can't use it.
We still on agenda items?
No, but we have a meeting on Thursday, so, I mean, we can go and,
Well, you're not going to resolve anything in 2 days.
well, I think we have a better understanding now, maybe, than we did.
All right, anything else on agenda review?
Nope.
Okay, we're going to move to individual items. Tracy, do you have anything?
No, I wanted to talk about, the only other thing at the school committee that they discussed was they are looking at proposed changes to the high school schedule, so for next year. And there was a presentation on that last night, and the benefits to moving. Right now, they do every other day and longer block times. In 2010, there was a mentality that having more time in front of the teacher was advantageous, and now they have done some research and have a committee that's been looking at it for 10 years and are thinking to reduce those times, reduce the class by one, but at least there'd be more consistency with the teacher interacting with the student on a more regular basis, which they think is very important, and social emotionally, there'll be a dolphin time where they can get extra help during the school day instead of having to do it after, so there's some benefits to it, and they've taken it under advisement after the presentation, so that's something that potentially could be coming next year, but they didn't take a vote. And other than that, there was no vote either on the budget. So at the next meeting, I'm not sure if it's the same night as we're meeting. And the other thing was Joe Tierney had asked that he also get a copy of our agenda sent to them, which was ironic because I had been trying to get my hands on their agenda in advance of the day of the meeting, but I think we've made progress.
Did he ask for it Tuesday morning?
He did ask that we get it when they get theirs, but he had said that he had talked to Dan, so I'm sure Dan will make that happen. And that's
Eric?
it.
I'm good, thank you.
Oh, and they talked about the St. Patrick's Day Parade already. Can't forget that.
Well, what?
The St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Oh, okay.
Will we meet again before then?
Yeah.
No.
No.
This is it.
Yeah.
It's election day on.
No, that's right, it's the 7th.
On the Thursday.
No, we won't. We won't, I'm sorry. We meet again on the 10th. The
Don't be
parade's on the
sorry.
7th. Parade's the 7th.
Candy.
Candy, and more candy, Dan. Your task.
Do you have a particular, I was thinking about that today, do you have a particular type of candy you would like to dole out? Is it like Dum-Dums or something?
Dum-Dums are a big hit.
Dum-Dums and Tootsie Rolls hurt when you hit
Yeah.
people with it, though.
Oh, so no Tootsie Rolls, is that?
Oh, they usually like
They're
that.
good ones, but I've accidentally hit people while throwing them before, and it's
Well, you
very
gotta ease
embarrassing.
up, Tracy. You
gotta
get
put a little lift on it.
2 feet
No,
away from
I
them and
know, I
throw
go like that.
fastballs. You gotta back off.
See, I like the I'm not a thrower. I like to go and hand them to the kids. So
Oh,
yeah,
are
that's,
you?
that's what the Dum-Dums are
He's got
easy.
such a soft side. Who
That's
knew?
good.
See what I can do to.
I've never seen you hand a dum-dum to
You're
a
a
kid.
liar.
Has anybody? I don't know.
Oh, sure.
I think you drive the
Oh,
car and
Dum-Dums
throw
in
it,
the
but
Yeah. Yeah, call MIA before the parade.
I'm all set for now. Mark?
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. Consent agenda.
So on the consent agenda tonight are the usual annual requests that come up. One is for Red Face Jack's extension of alcohol for the premise for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Also, the Chamber of Commerce on annual cleanup days requesting a fee waiver, and also their summer concert series approval, and then donations have come in for the various departments.
I just have one question on the consent agenda. Red Face Jacks, did we require them in the past to have their own detail? Because I noticed in their letter that they said a detail, where is it?
Section of 20.
Yeah, it's at the corner of 28 and C Street. That's not really on their property. Was that a requirement for the expansion or the extension?
That, I
Passed.
don't know the specifics on that, because this has been going on.
I know we've absolutely allowed it, but I just didn't know if they had to have the, I somehow recollect that they had to have a detail for this, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, if the board's fine with one being at the corner there.
I'm fine with it. I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? So that passes unanimously. And town administrator updates.
Other than just Thursday night, we're gonna plan to have you like in a horseshoe style facing the audience. Harwich will be in the middle. The subgroup have asked that we provide the narration for the night, so I think it's going to be myself and Paul McCormick, and then probably, although I haven't talked to you yet, Mr. Forrest, to try to provide, it's time for the towns to own this situation, a lot less than CDM Smith. So each town will have like an opportunity to speak to its own process here. So we're kind of working out the script over the next 48 hours as to how that's going to go, but somehow I drew the short straw, and we'll narrate the evening for all of us. So. But it's exciting. It's an exciting time. It's 3 years of planning. So, yeah.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
I think.
Is there an agenda?
Yep. You should.
Yeah, I think it was in one of our prior packets. Maybe we need to get it out again.
I don't think I recall seeing that.
Is it
It was
in
with
our
the
mail?
flyer. It was, when you saw the flyer on the meeting, it was attached to that.
Well, Linda Dennehy posted it officially, I think, today.
Shoot.
This thing's so big. Thanks, Mark.
Here we go.
Other than that, I don't have anything else.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? It's unanimous.